The walls of time are breaking down. You need to listen. The only way to save the universe. Watch Type 40.
Hello there, it's time for Type 40 Live, materialising here again with the live stream Doctor Who magazine show across your view screen in real time on YouTube, Rumble, and over on Facebook too. Always in front of a live chat full of friends, fans and companions just like you. Prepare, everybody, for lots of sand, though not much sun. It has to be said, still very grey here in Great Britain, in the home, the cultural home, the spiritual home, the actual home of Doctor Who. Where am I? Yes, here I am. I'm Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks. I'm here to ride the dunes and extract something precious and raw for your enjoyment. Right from the 70s, a bit like me. And a lot to talk about, get stuck into on this edition of the show. Something you've been asking for, and so have they too. Very much demanded. A real Doctor Who favourite about to be properly discussed with heavy debate and meaningful. Let's be honest, it's going to be the same old knob jokes and lots of nostalgia and banter too, isn't it? All thrown into the mix here for another evening's worth of content from across the Whoniverse. Okay, let's get into it. Who and what and where? I think, we've got to find out. That's it. Of course it is. Something warm and something cozy to remind you of what's going on here. So if you're on Facebook, of course, as always, if you're in the Type 40 Facebook group, don't forget to hit the little blue link there, and then Facebook will tell StreamYard who you are, and StreamYard will tell us, and we'll all get on first name terms. It's even cozier in this little console room, isn't it? With the lights down low, so we have to know who one another is, don't we? Yeah, so on this one, it's the first proper event show, really, of 2024, isn't it? So we like to do these sort of deep dives, and we're going to be digging and drilling right down into a piece of Doctor Who history. That's the dictionary definition, really, of classic. But before we get into it, we're going to recapture the spirit of 1977 to here with the panel. Of course we are. And who's on the panel this time? Well, I'm happy to say that... I think he'd have had me shot if I hadn't invited him. I'm happy to welcome back Simon Horton.
Greetings. How wonderful to be here.
And do you mean that? Look at him grinning. That's a big smile on your face, mate.
It's a very big smile on my face because I've been wanting to do this for so long. This console room, I absolutely adore this console room to the extent where I've actually got, as you know, Dan, the stained glass windows that are in the back of the shot there in the console room. I had those made in my house. I have got them in a window in my house. I have those stained glass roundels, and splendid they look too. So I just love this console room. Love it.
screen accurate.
Yeah, very screen accurate. I went to enormous lengths to research them and get the not only the shapes right, but the colours absolutely spot on as well. It was a real labour of love to do them, and it looks great. I just love this console room. It's just glorious.
I think we have a bit of a fan here, but that's been said of you before, hasn't it? With this particular console room, it was on screen for such a short period of time, only 4 or 5 appearances at best, and so we associate it with a very precise time in Doctor Who history, and that's exactly where we're going back to on this edition of Type 40 Live. And not everybody on the panel is a relic from the 70s. Some came along before, and some came along afterwards. She came along quite a bit later, come to think of it. It's starry-eyed girl Sarah Graham.
I wondered where you was going with that.
you weren't even thought of when this
No,
was
I wasn't. No, definitely an 80s baby.
Show off.
Yeah, my it was the 2 Doctors was starting when I was born. So sorry.
What? Yeah, just need a few seconds for that one to sink in. Oh, no, great to see you, Sarah, and I'm glad you're up for this one too, because it is. Are you easily frightened? Because this is a bit of a thriller we're going to get stuck into. Have you got the curtains drawn?
I have indeed got the curtains drawn. Yeah. I love it. It is just one of the best. I think it could be one of the most quotable ones. It must be between this and City and Death.
Yeah, I would agree, Sarah. Spot on.
Well, I think you should just check if you've got some of those curtains that go floor to ceiling, just in case there's a couple of silver feet poking out from underneath. Whilst in the meantime, I welcome our mate John Yulden back to the panel as well. Hiya, John.
You're muted, John. We want to hear you. No, you're muted. There you are.
He's back in TARDIS blue as well. Welcome back to the show. First time in 2024, John.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on, all of you. It's great.
Lovely to have you back.
So welcome back.
I hope you like Robots of Death, because if you don't, you're on the wrong show, mate.
Robots of Death is my favourite, so this is perfect.
Oh, okay. I'll say, at the risk of feeling very, very senior, where did you come along in the equation then? Was it a long time after, or was it around this time, or was it?
No, it was 80s, and to be honest with you, Davison was my first Doctor, but my mum and dad, they brought home one day when they started doing the VHS releases. They brought home Death to the Daleks, and Robots of Death. And Death to the Daleks, I was like, oh, blimey, that third Doctor's good, isn't he? And then suddenly I saw Robots of Death, and Tom just blew it out of the park. And I was like, right, yeah, this is brilliant. I'm going to watch that again until it burns out my VHS tape. And it is still to this day, I love every moment of it. It's a great story, isn't it?
This is the show for me. I suppose sometimes it only takes 2 stories, doesn't it? For some of us, it could take a lot more. Now, I know that Charlotte Shields is gradually making her way through the classic series in piecemeal form, but I am happy to say that she is pretty learned, I think, in this one and everything that we've got to discuss on this edition of the show. Welcome back, Charlotte.
Yes. This is the one that I've watched multiple times, to be fair. It's one of the classics. I'm a lot more, I know.
Have you been this week, Charlotte?
Oh, good. It's sort of back at work, so the kids are sort of being fun. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about this.
I wonder what the kids would make running around this console room, because there's a lot of steps to potentially trip up on here, isn't there? There's a few health and safety hazards in this console room.
Oh, I don't know what they'd make of it because of how dark it is. Like, they're sort of very prone to lights and stuff, so they'd probably be like, I can't see half of what they're doing.
It's strange when you see a set like this. I mean, I couldn't remember this from the time, Simon. I mean, I must have seen it, but it just hadn't registered as being the same place.
Wow, really? Gosh,
that's registered in the same place with me.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, I remember when this was first introduced, obviously, as happened in those days, it was introduced without any fanfare at all. We didn't know that there was a new console room. It's not like today at all.
No.
And so this was a complete surprise when it first appeared in the Mask of Mandragora. And I fell in love with it straight away, which was odd because I can see why fans would not have fallen in love with it, because at that point we were so used, obviously, to that gleaming white console room that had been kicking around for 13 years. And so to suddenly get this, it was a complete turnabout. And so people could have reacted badly to it, but I just remember just absolutely falling in love with it straight away.
Well, I wonder, because we do have another turnabout about to occur here at Type 40 Live. But I think people are going to be, generally speaking, on the upside of this one, though, because we've pulled this stunt several times before when we bring out the mega geek Ian David Diaz there as well. Hello, mate.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello, pal. How are you? So where do you sit, mate? You have been known in the past to have some strong opinions on console rooms in Doctor Who. So, I know you're not too fond of the coral look, Ian, but where are you when it comes to the wood paneling as opposed to the bright white of the bulk of the classic show?
I do like that console room. I got to admit, it is very, very, very cheap, though. I mean, it is very.
No, I'm going to argue with you on that. It's not.
But I do like it a lot, and it did match the tone of Robots of Death as well. So, and also it starts off with the classic, doesn't it? The classic.
Well, the tone. I think the tone of the whole of that time in history too, because the one thing it reminds me of, Ian, is Mr. Rumbold's office from Are You Being Served? Do you remember that?
Not really, no.
No, I get what you mean. I do get what you mean.
Yeah, it's a nice one. It's a nice.
I think
Yeah.
Tom's look at the time was perfect for it because he had lots of burgundy and brown and sort of Victorian-esque feeling in his costume.
It did.
So it sort of feels like, to me, something that I associate a bit more with New Who, how like the TARDIS reflects the Doctor sort of outwardly. It feels like Classic was almost doing that a little bit here, their own version of that, of this sort of, because was this in the height, had we had the Hinchcliffe era?
This is the Hinchcliffe era, and so that's why all of this feels like you're saying, Charlotte. It's very gothic. It's always described as gothic.
Yeah,
it's dark.
And it's dark, almost, and like sort of almost dark romantic as well. For
yes. Oh, totally,
100%. Like
also,
I thought of like Wuthering Heights and stuff like that.
I adore Tom Baker in this. Tom Baker is the Doctor in this, totally. The cleverest man in the room, the funniest man in the room. Seriously, those teeth, that hair. I mean, he is in the height of his powers, Tom Baker.
Well,
so solemn. So heroic at the same time as well. And who can blame him, really, because he was facing down some pretty serious foes in the late 70s, not least of all, the scariest of them all, this one. So Doctor Who was up against Mrs. Mary Whitehouse at the time. Whatever the show did, it could never keep on the right side of Mary Whitehouse for too long. But I think Tom kind of relished the challenge of vanquishing Mrs. Mary Whitehouse. So I don't think he ever really did get the best of her, but he gave it a good go, didn't he? He gave it a good go.
And of course he did, and Philip Hinchcliffe always said that he was delighted when Mary Whitehouse complained because it meant the viewing figures went up the following week. Of course, the irony of it is, and the tragic irony of it is, that it did cost him, Philip Hinchcliffe, his job in the end, because he was moved on because of the controversy of the Deadly Assassin in this very season, 2 stories earlier. It did cost him his job. Tragically, I mean, goodness, I would have loved Philip Hinchcliffe to stay there for another year. There we go.
Doctor Who was a massive part of popular culture, wasn't it? I mean, it had been practically since its very beginning, practically since week 1. But at this point in the late 70s, it was absolutely huge. But the bulk, the spirit of 77 was kind of captured more or less by sites like this, wasn't it? So no, it's not the Ogrons, everybody. These are Big Brothers. These are the Bee Gees back in 1977, the kings of disco. And when I think back to this time, when I was really little, Ian, in 1977, it is sites like the Bee Gees swaggering around on building sites in really rough early pop videos. That's what I remember. Stuff like this. Did you ever dress like this?
What are you talking about? The Dorset, that's still in.
He still dresses like this now.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a normal Friday night in Dorset.
Yeah, what do you call it? The BG on the right's got a bit of a pot belly, you know. You look at that, trying to hide it there.
He's trying to hold it in. It's not working.
Yeah.
Yes,
Hilarious.
Robin, Morris, and Barry, the Bee Gees themselves. Yeah, and they were riding high at the time, very, very popular, and about to have massive success, weren't they? With Saturday Night Fever, that was very close by. That hadn't been released yet, but the three. I wonder if you can guess what the three biggest films of early 1977 were. Would you like to have a guess at that, John? Without
Could it
googling it.
be something beginning with an S?
Is that and a
You could be
W
right.
as well?
No.
Yeah.
W? Yeah.
Possibly.
No, you're a little too early. A little too
Oh.
early.
Oh, of course. If it's,
Was one Jaws?
no, that was
No.
75.
That's
Too
75.
late.
Oh,
That's
No.
too late.
Oh,
So we're talking, Dan. We're talking basically now in the first couple of months of 77. Is that what we're talking?
Yeah, very precise spot.
Oh gosh.
See, I can
Close
recall
Encounters was Close Encounters. No, Close Encounters was later, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Later in the year.
smug about this because I know the answers, you see.
Go on. You're going to have to put us out of our
Go on,
misery.
then.
We're not going to get it.
Okay, so the three big movies at this time in 1977 were these. So it was number 3 was Clint Eastwood in The Enforcer. That was the third of the Dirty Harry movies. Was the third?
Yeah.
5, I think they made in the finish. Carrie, the Brian De Palma's adaptation of the Stephen King book. That was also a big film back then, scaring the life out of people. A lot of people find that scarier than Jaws. I think I can probably see why. But at number 1 was 1976's big movie Rocky, which had taken a little while longer to come to Britain. But these were the top 3 films in Britain in February of 1977. I think that there can't be many people who haven't seen any of these. But obviously, Charlotte, you came along a couple of decades after these were released.
Just a bit.
Have you seen these?
I've seen Rocky because my granddad was obsessed with those movies. So I've got a memory of watching one at his house. See, I'm weird. I love reading Stephen King books, but I've never watched Carrie as the movie. I know the book.
It's not great. I mean, it's very critically renowned. A lot of people love it. I don't rate it very highly, I have to say.
To be fair, I think most of the movie adaptations just couldn't do it for King.
Yeah,
there was just something about his books that either they got not good directors in who didn't know the source material, or they were just not good picks for adaptations. I think you had a lot of bad Stephen King movies, sadly.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true.
These are 3 movies. I think that generally speaking, though, Ian, these are 3 movies that have stood the test of time, that get repeated on TV quite a lot, that get pimped out a lot when it comes to when there's a new format comes around, whether it's Blu-ray, 4K. These are pretty 3 fondly remembered movies, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I remember The Enforcer that had David Soul. No, was it? Oh, was that the one with David Soul and the girl from Magni and Lacey?
I think that was Magnum Force.
All right. So I don't remember Enforcer then. Is that the second one or the third one? Who knows?
Well,
Carrie's good, though. Carrie's a good movie.
How about the music of early 1977? What do you think? What would you associate with
Leo
early
Sayer?
70s?
No, I don't know. I can't remember the music.
Could be Leo Sayer. ABBA have got to be in there somewhere.
I won't keep you waiting. You're right, Ian. Leo Sayer had the big hit that time. When I Need You, a terrible ballad from Leo Sayer. A little bit better on the right-hand side, there was David Soul's Don't Give Up on Us. Of course, the late David Soul passed away not that long ago. You've just mentioned him, Ian, from when he was in an earlier Dirty Harry movie. And also floating around the time, too, was Julie Covington's Don't Cry For Me, Argentina, which was from the musical Evita, was it?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah, Evita. Yeah, I can say that's Evita.
What's wrong with Leo Sayer, Dan?
Well,
Come on. This from the man who loves Nightmare of Eden and Dolls from the Bannermen.
I I was around when Leo Sayer was massive, and it seemed cheesy even then. But it was only in the 90s when university culture sort of latched onto him that he had a reversal of fortune. But because for years, the entire time I was growing up, Leo Sayer was considered to be sort of the epitome of kind of naff.
Yeah, it's true.
That your maid and aunt liked.
Yeah, it's true. It's all true.
But
So
even ABBA was considered that at one point.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, and suddenly they were.
Oh, they were very uncool at the time. In '77, they were very uncool.
Yeah.
They went out of fashion, didn't they? A little in the 70s. In the late 80s, I'd say ABBA went slightly out of fashion. It was most unfortunate. Here we are rambling on about all sorts under the sun here, catapulting ourselves back to 1977 to set the scene. Before we go on too much longer, I mean, we may have disturbed the lunches of people who are watching on YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook with talk of Leo Sayer and Julie Covington there in particular. I'm quite fond of the David Soul track, to tell you the truth. But I think we should go and check on them in the live chat and see what they've got to say about all of this. Where are we? Yeah.
Welcome to Type 40.
Hi, everyone, says Lord Thoth. He's first on door this time.
Hello, love.
It was crimpling the blue. There's ahoy, shipmates. Good to see you both. Heretics also in Heretic OSJC. Good evening. All getting ready to sit in front of the TV, watch the podcast, and do nothing. He's got a 3-day weekend.
Oh,
show off.
fantastic.
3-day
Enjoy.
I was going to say 3D weekend then, Ian.
Maybe it is as well. 3D.
Every weekend's a 3D weekend. It depends on what you're doing, doesn't it? Greetings, everyone. Please don't throw hands at me.
Very good.
Very good, Gary.
Hello,
Getting
Gary.
in with the puns as early as possible. Good evening, all, says Peter Harrington. Hiya, Peter. Poor Peter's saying good day to everybody. And so's Doug Sims. Good day, all.
Hi,
Very literally there. Mark Milford's in too. Hello, Dan and the Who family. That sounds like a late 1970s band. Was it like a Manhattan Transfer? You'd see them on New Faces or something like that.
Oh,
Simon?
it sounds a bit like a 80s sitcom as well.
Oh, Dan, somebody's not happy in the chat. Look in the chat right now.
Oh well, I'll get to them in. I'll get to them in due course. Punch it, says Lord Thoth. And how
Punch what? That's a bit rude.
Says Sam. I know. I've got to keep punching it, but nothing's happening.
You probably punched it a bit too much, Dan.
I'll try after the show. Oh God, why do I say these things?
You bring it on yourself, mate.
Tom from T Dwarf Productions is in and says, "Hi everyone, I'm going to London Comic Con this weekend to meet some Who actors and give them some monsters."
Yeah, and I've got to say hello to T Dwarf because here is the little robot of death that Tom made for me. He's here, perfect timing. There we are.
Oh, let's get a closer look at
there we are. There he is, little V14 that Tom made for me. Look at it's his little feet. Look at those little feet. I mean, they're just absolutely perfect. Thanks, Tom.
Looks like a Trumpton bloke.
Yeah, that's exactly what it looks like. It's Trumpton. Trumpton meets the robots of death. Perfect.
What else have we got? Darren's here. We meet again. We do meet again. We're here, and so are you. We're going to get stuck into so much on this edition of Type 40 Live. Of course we are. Dan says, "What? What, Lord Thoth? What? Hail," says Vanessa Law. Hello, all.
Vanessa.
Says Dada Debaser. I have to be careful every time I say that. And we've got lots more hellos being bandied around as well. Stephanie Barrett's back in the live chat with morning from Hobart, Tasmania. It's 5:07 a.m. here. She's got an early appointment this weekend. She can't stay for long. Well, don't tell the rest of them that. They'll all want to go off and do something else. Don't do that. Stay for as long as possible. How do, says Simon Anthony. How do, back.
Yeah, we still need to know from Simon. What did you work on? We need to know what Who stuff you worked on, mate.
Simon will be joining us on a future edition of the podcast. Heretic says, my other half says she really enjoys the remix music that you start with, the Who remix music. That's not a remix. That's original music. That's the very best theme tune in the whole of Doctor Who podcasting and YouTubering. And it is from Ordred Audio Visual. It's the Type 40 Live theme tune. Everybody, yes. What else have we got here? People posting their reviews of the story. We haven't even got to that yet. And my favourite robots are still the Quarks, says T-Dwarf Productions. Ooh, that could
Controversial choice.
Cat or two among the pigeons. Love that console room, says Doug Sims. I think most people are rather fond of that. Tony says Newbury's wooden console room was a triumph. There, he's a fan as well. Got lots of howdies and hails and hellos. Timescale says, hello, I'm a relic from the 70s. Talking about me? Well, we could be. We'll just talk about the whole of the 70s. I suspect that Grego from the Timescales was probably, I think he probably looked as the style icon. I'd say that's quite likely. Sarah is making me feel old, says Big T. You
making us all feel old, mate.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Both got the sense fear in. We've got
hello, sense fear.
Again, what made them decide to get rid of this beautiful?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Vanessa. They didn't decide to get rid of it at all. It warped in storage between the two seasons, and so they couldn't use it again. Because it was made of wood. It literally they stored it between after season 14, and it all got warped in storage. That was the end of that. So I had to build a new one again, and they went back to the white one. So sad.
All warped. It happens to the best of us, doesn't it?
Indeed. It's all warped.
They could have done an entire story arc, couldn't they, about the TARDIS getting woodworm?
That's what they should have done. They missed a trick, didn't they? Cyber woodworm.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah, who knows all the stories that we could have missed out on had they not been as imaginative as the members of the panel here. Evening, guys and gals, says Nigel David. You've got to be careful which kind of voice you say that in, but glad to have you back, Nigel.
Hello, Nigel.
Who else is here? I'm scrolling away. Lots of conversations going on. Lots and lots of greetings. Always fabulous to see. Disco.
It's because that was when you brought up the Bee Gees.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Who had the Bee Gees who had the chests of Yetis
and the roller skates.
I know, but sounds like a chipmunk on helium.
Yes.
Evening, says Daryl Joyce. I'm 5 minutes behind, but we'll leap forward in time if there's a dull bit. Bad luck, they've got the wrong show. Radio Free Tomorrow is the one you're looking for. They're the ones that do that stuff. No dull bits here at 40 Live. Hello, Stephen, if you're watching. Still them all. See them all. And still affected. See them all and still affected.
I don't know. That might be a reference back to the Bee Gees again. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Yeah. Hi, all, says TARDIS travels. Yes, and lots of people. Yeah, various people debating the merits or not of various adaptations of Stephen King films. Blimey, what a hornet's nest we've stirred up there with that one. Well, I say we. I mean me, really. Stephen Noonan's in the live chat. Our doctor on call, of course, is. As soon as my flipping back's turned, you're reviewing a Hinge Group story. Good evening, Doctor.
Sorry.
Hope you're well, mate. To speak to you soon as well. My reads is there just with a smiley face, very enigmatic there. That's what we like to see. Keep the comments coming, everybody. There's so much to get stuck into on this edition of Type 40 Live. As you know, that's why you're here. That's why we're here too. And it wouldn't be the same without your comments and your memories as well as ours. Where to first? What first? Lots more coming up later on. Lots of nostalgia, lots of bants, and all manner of other things. So stay precisely, exactly where you are. Daryl, that does include you, mate. That definitely includes you.
The universe is collapsing. The only way to save it is to watch Type 40.
TV, generally speaking, was a lot like the secondary console room in the 20th century, wasn't it? Through all the way up to the late 90s, I think. Far, far cozier than it is now. And although we idolised the stars, the leads of popular dramas and comedies, and the others, the people who entertained the family, fronting those sort of big variety shows, and game shows and things, the faces who would recur across these various shows And across all 3/4 channels that we had in Britain around that time, we were just as fond of them too. There was something I think of a parlor game about working out when some actors and actresses turned up on screen, working out where we thought we knew them from other shows, whether that person, the pretty woman under the giant serrated skull cap on An Alien World, really was the same girl we'd seen seducing a policeman in her nightie the previous week on some other show. The actress Pamela Salem, who died earlier in the month, was a prime example of this kind of actress, adored and respected by Doctor Who fans for her 2 roles in the supporting casts a decade apart. News of her passing away at the age of 80 broke just as we were live streaming last week. Obviously, Simon, 80 is a good age.
Yeah.
And Pamela Salem had a very full life, a full filmography, didn't she? We'd seen her in countless shows and several big movies. But I was quite shocked when word reached us last week that she was no longer with us.
Yeah, I know, it was terrible. And as you say, we'd literally just gone on the air, and suddenly people started pinging messages in the chat. And I was thinking, no, that can't be right. Have we missed something here? And of course, while we were on air, I did check, and it's all true. And gosh, just heartbreaking. She's one of those people that was so huge in the sort of 70s. She was just everywhere, just a ubiquitous face. And so she's one of those people that you think is just always going to be around forever. And of course, as you say, Dan, returned in remembrance of the remembrance of the Daleks 10 years later. And she's just magnificent. She's statuesque, isn't she? She's just a wonderful woman.
I think she was only about 5'1", 5'2", but the performances were always kind of larger than life, and it didn't really matter how small the part was. She was a British actress. She was born in Bombay, in India, educated first in Germany, and then at the Central School of Speech and Drama in London, and originally auditioned for the role of Leela, which I only found out for the first time this very week, John.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that at all. That would have been interesting to see how she would have played that role, because she was a talent, wasn't she? Very sad that she's passed away. As I said to you at the beginning, it was one of the first VHSs I got, and it wasn't just Tom as the 4th Doctor and Louise as Leela. It was the cast in that Robots of Death story that really did speak to me as a kid of, this is a knockout story. They are so good. The characters are well written, they're well acted, and she is right at the top of the tier, isn't she? Just as she is in Remembrance of the Daleks.
She was that close to getting the role of Leela. She was definitely on the short list, and the reason then she got given the part in the Robots of Death, and also she plays the voice of Zoannon in The Face of Evil. And it was they literally gave her the roles because as consolation that she was that close to getting Leela and didn't get it. And she'd have been brilliant as Leela, as brilliant as Louise Jameson is. She'd have been great as Leela.
I got to admit, though, when I first saw the Robots of Death as a young man, I watched it because of Leela. Tell you the truth, I mean, I did understand what was going on, but I didn't understand what was going on. Do you know what I mean? It's only throughout the years when I watched it multiple times that I realized that, it was one of the very best Doctor Who episodes ever made. And again, right, I love it when the Doctor's the smartest man in the room and he knows, and you know what I mean? I just love that because I think that's essential Doctor Who. So, and this woman is gorgeous. What can I say? She's lovely. I've seen uncountable loads of things in the 70s. It's a shame she's gone, but she was just off, really, wasn't she? She had the potential of being a really big actress in the UK, but she just missed it for some reason.
Well, in a way she did, but she had so many roles in the 70s and through the 80s as well. She was in just about everything. So you're right, Ian, in that she missed going kind of stellar in the way that she could have been absolutely leading star material. And I think, in all honesty, in today's world she probably would be.
Yes,
I think it's simply that back in the 70s you had so fewer leading female roles in comparison to today. And I think she would have been.
Dinah Rigg made it huge. I mean, she had the looks and everything, to rival Dinah Rigg. But it's just, I guess, it's just luck, isn't it, that she didn't really get a part that established her.
And she was money as well, wasn't she? So you know.
Yeah. Maybe she was happy with the parts that she got there, because she was always working, and so maybe she was happy that.
Well, here she is in The Professionals with Lewis Collins himself there, but her first sort of main series that we'd probably know was in Out of the Unknown in 1971, followed by Jason King, The Onedian Lion, and things like Van der Valk. She was in All Creatures Great and Small, Crown Court, The Tripods, Ever Decreasing Circles. The same year as she did that, she was also over in the States doing an episode of Magnum P.I., because she had that kind of look, a strikingly beautiful woman. She was also in Blake 7, wasn't she? She was Brian Blessed's sort of high priestess in an early episode of Blake 7, which I think is so memorable, and she's positively bewitching in it too. But obviously, when it comes to sort of mainstream parts, I think what a lot of people may remember her most for was as Joanne on EastEnders. She was only on it for around a year opposite Leslie Grantham. She was sort of his boss, kind of handler, when he went to work for the mob in the late 80s after he left Angie and the Vic to run a wine bar. But this is a very sinister character, and there she's all striking in sequins, looking the epitome of the 80s, just as she managed to sort of sum up the 70s sort of glamour as well. She was almost chameleon-like, and yet you don't see pictures of her plastered in makeup or or with her hair dyed various different colours. And yet she'd managed to escape into these parts, and you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, it's her again. It'd be a case of, where did I see her last? I know I've seen her from somewhere, Charlotte. She's one of those kind of actresses that just just completely immerses herself in each and every role and then moved on to the next one.
Yeah, and I think, because I remember when I first watched Robots, and one of the scenes that stuck with me was her scene when she was getting attacked, her character, because she just, her fear and terror was so powerful. You could feel it on screen, and that's like, it's hard to convey that convincingly. Like any actress can scream, any actress can sort of do that whole routine, but with her, that scene stuck with me because I actually felt really scared for her, and really because in classic Who, being a supporting character, you could die. So there wasn't that security. Now, like a more modern Who, where pretty much you can tell if it's going to be signposted or they're all going to be okay. Whereas in classic, they were a little bit more risky with what they did with characters, I think. And so that anger, you didn't know.
And truth be told, Charlotte, of course, The Robots of Death is a classic example, because for anybody that hasn't seen it, we're not going to spoil it totally, but there's only 2 of the other members of the cast that survive to the end. Everybody else dies. So you're right, Charlotte.
It's a shame. She all it took was one part for her to be a household name, because you're right, Dan, she appeared in everything in the 70s, everything. And she is a very talented actress, as everybody knows, but it's a shame. She just missed it. It needed one part for her to be established, like the other actresses. I'm just saying, she just slightly missed it. But the thing is that, as I said, you can remember and stuff, but you can't place her.
And I think it speaks volumes to her as well that she was in so many parts, which means that the casting directors at the time knew how good she was, and everybody wanted her in their shows. So that's high praise, isn't it?
After she married,
it wasn't like that in those days.
She married the Irish actor Michael O'Hagan in the early 80s, and eventually they did move to the States, and she appeared in ER, Party of Five, and The West Wing in the 90s as well. So I had a pretty decent career over in the States too. But there was lots of television and several key movies as well. Dadi DeBase in the live chat watching on YouTube says that Pamela was in a really raunchy Joan Collins movie I watched just the other night. The Bitch. She was definitely in The Bitch. And so was one of the other cast members of The Robots of Death too. We'll come to her later on. But she worked with Sean Connery twice. First in the first great train robbery in the early mid-70s, and then again playing Miss Moneypenny
Yep.
Here, Never Say Never
Yes.
Again in 1983 with Sean Connery. This was a Miss Moneypenny that was very much of the Princess Diana era. There she is wearing a cute little bow tie, and I always forget that it's her in that. But here she is again with Sean Connery and Barbara Carrier in the unofficial James Bond film. Yet again, another seminal movie. Another a crucial sort of part, an iconic part in some respects, and she just becomes the character in it.
And the other thing to mention as well, and Darren Atken has just very timely reminded us of this in the chat, that she was the villainess in Into the Labyrinth, the HTV series. She was Belor against Ron Moody's Rothko in Into the Labyrinth, created, of course, by Bob Baker. And she was fantastic in that as well. I mean, yeah, there you go, Dan.
Wow.
I mean, look at that.
Of course, I've got that as well. Yeah, this show terrified me when I was a child, and she was playing the evil witch Belor. It ran for only about 2 or 3 seasons. It was a very cheap and cheap kids sort of mystery show on weekday afternoons on ITV. And again, I had no idea that this was the same woman for years and years and years afterwards who'd been in all those other things. There are lots of people in the live chat, just as we expected, who have a great well of affection here for Pamela Salem, including Simon Ashley, who says it's a big loss to Doctor Who, the passing away of Pamela Salem. As long as we have recordings, they're not lost, says Simon Anthony. She'll always be with us.
Yeah.
What a voice, says Peter Harrington. Yes, she did. She did have a very distinctive voice too. And she did a fair amount of Shakespeare, as I understand. In fact, I think she did some Shakespeare with Paul Darrow, Sarah, from Blake 7.
Oh.
Oh, I'd love to see that. God, I wonder who tuned the scenery
I was
more.
going to say, who's going to be bigger, like, look at me on that stage.
Both of them, that would have been the Battle of the Leviathans, wouldn't it?
Sam says, I love Pamela Salem, both as an actress and as someone to meet at signings. She was lovely.
Never saw her. Never saw her in person. Never saw her at a signing. Never saw her at a convention. So I'd be interested to know more, Sam, about what she was like.
I was just going to ask that. How did she embrace the Doctor Who fandom, or was it just another job in all of her lots of long line of jobs?
She worked a hell of a lot, says Peter Harrington. You can say that again. I mean, it's impossible to go through her entire filmography. It really is. I mean, as good as the part is in Robots of Death, and we'll come to that in a short while, if anything, her second proper appearance as Professor Rachel Stenson in Remembrance of the Daleks the story is just a seminal, but the part is arguably far better. I feel she's fantastic in Remembrance of the Daleks, and the ideal foil really for Sylvester McCoy. I think if he hadn't have only picked up Ace in the previous story, I'd have loved to have seen him sort of whisk away Rachel instead, or as well as.
Well, again, in modern Who now, the team, the Rocket team in Remembrance of the Daleks would have had their own spin-off show, and she'd be heading it, and that's in many ways is the tragic irony of it, because I'm not in any doubt that Russell T Davies would have run with it back in the day. If they were doing sort of spin-off shows in those days, and she'd have been brilliant. I mean, that could have been the part that you're talking about, Ian, that might have launched her.
Yeah.
That could have been her leading role.
I will say that scene in Remembrance of the Daleks, where she gives Group Captain Gilmore a good talking down in the cafe, just showed she was brilliant.
Oh, she was.
You wouldn't argue, would you, John?
And this is how I wanted Kate Lethbridge Stewart to be like.
Yes.
Rachel. Now that's a character that you're interested in.
I agree. And again, had she been younger, wouldn't it have been lovely to see Pamela Salem in that part? And she would have been brilliantly cast as Kate Lethbridge Stewart.
Absolutely.
Yeah, she had lots of great moments in that story, getting stuck in, going head first there into a Dalek casing with Sylvester McCoy. In particular, it's a great moment and a great story. And you're quite right. I mean, that set of characters did capture people's imaginations. And although Russell T Davies has never done anything with them, Big Finish have, got them back together on Big Finish initially for the anniversary story, 1963, the assassination games there that reunited Pamela with Simon Williams as Gilmore and Karen Gledhill there as Alison. And that was so successful that it led to this entire spin-off series of box sets, Countermeasures there, all set in the 60s initially. They're kind of Department S, Jason King, the Champions style stories, aren't they? Set at a very particular time. It could almost be an ITC show, is what I'm getting at, Simon.
Yeah.
But at least somebody reunited these actors.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was wonderful. As I say, that's the kind of thing that would have been good to see as a spin-off show, but at least, yeah, they did it. They still did it. And you look at her there, and she's one of those people that has just got classic good looks, just absolute classic good looks, timeless. Because there she looks perfect to be cast in the 60s, and yet if you look at her again in the Robots of Death or in we're going back to Into the Labyrinth, she looks very 80s in that. So she was absolutely timeless in that respect, because she'd got those classic good looks.
Thing is, though, she was
woman.
she was kind of like a chameleon actress, wasn't she? That if you didn't look closely, you would never thought that she was the same actress that was.
Well, she was a character actress, wasn't she?
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. She's again, I would say this like she just missed it, man. She just missed
But maybe she didn't, as I say, maybe her lot in life was to be a character actress, because that's what she did so brilliantly.
Well, I don't think any actor or actress wants that. I think every actor, actress, they want to be noticed. They want to be
Fair
seen,
point.
you know. So, but anyway.
I'd argue that she was. I'd argue she was very well known.
Maybe you may be right. You may be right, Simon. Yeah.
I think it's right. Well, when you said, Ian, earlier that she's one of those people that you saw in lots of things and didn't necessarily know that it was her. Yeah. So she was known, but probably not by name, that people wouldn't have been able to name her.
Not a household name, in other words.
Yeah.
Peter Harrington says, damn, I had the chance of a signing, but I thought I'd get a chance to see her again. Sadly not, Sarah. That's from Peter. And Heretic says, Remembrance of the Daleks is probably my absolute favourite classic Who episode. Yeah, she's an integral part of it. I can't imagine.
That's the only one I like.
The story without her.
Of Sylvester McCoy. It's the only one I liked was Sylvester McCoy. I
agree.
Yeah.
Oh, Heretic goes on to say, I'm a little biased because McCoy is my favourite Doctor.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's so good. I love it. What's not to love? It's a fabulous story, I say. She's essentially it. Chunky Gilmore, says Richard Brookswell. Speak for yourself. Brooks and talk on it, see how you get on. Yes, there she is with Sylvester McCoy again in Remembrance of the Daleks. Yeah, so when it comes to character actresses on British television, obviously there are some that are of a certain type. The Miriam Margolyes type, and then there are the Pamela Salems, Ian, who run around with Lewis Collins in The Professionals, and all those kind of action shows as well. She did sitcoms too, as well as dramas and serial dramas and all manner of other things. Really check out her filmography, and you would be amazed at the things. Actually, it'd be easy to list the things that Pamela Salem wasn't in.
Just looking at her in that photo, Dan, she'd have made an excellent Romana as well.
Yeah, good point.
She made a good money penny. I remember that film. It wasn't one of the official James Bond films, but she did strike a chord with me.
It was a good film. I have a lot of love for Never Say Never Again. I know it's maligned.
Yeah,
but I do like
the little Rowan Atkinson cameo.
Absolutely, yeah.
I haven't seen it in a long time. I really must get round to it. Get round to it again. As she was reunited too with the robots themselves.
Oh wow!
That's a wonderful photo.
But look at her face there. She did do events. She resided in Florida, and that is where she spent her final days. But she did make it over to Britain for these kind of events pretty regularly, as well as recording various things for Big Finish, reprising both of the characters, Professor Rachel, and she played too in the spin-off series, The Robots. I haven't actually heard that one, John. Have you heard those?
Not heard The Robots yet. I've heard Robophobia. I think that's the first 7th Doctor audio. That's good, but I've not heard the Robot series yet. That's one I've got to go through yet. It's on the list.
And again, I just think one of the tragedies of the Russell T Davies era, certainly because it would have fitted so well, was that he didn't return to the Robots of Death. For so long, people have been saying, bring back the Robots of Death. And it would have been brilliant to bring them back and bring Toos back, bring Pamela Salem back as Toos. It just would have been an absolute gift. And I just wish they'd done that. And again, it's one of those things, it's too late now. It's just a shame.
It would have been nice to have got a proper full sequel with her back in that role opposite Tom Baker. That didn't happen, but she did appear with Tom Baker in another Big Finish audio drama, The Silent Scream by James Goss. That had got Lala Ward in it as well. And here she is reunited with Tom, which I think was about 10, 12 years ago, something like that. Yeah. So, it's always nice to see. Always nice to see as well. Love stuff like that. And yeah, keep the comments coming, everybody. Your memories of Pamela Salem in various roles, including obviously her 2/3 in Doctor Who. Simon Anthony says, so what out of the unknown story had these robots in it? It was great too. I don't know. I barely know anything about Out of the Unknown. I think some of that doesn't exist anymore, but I could be wrong. A lot of those old anthology shows, Simon, were decimated, weren't they? In the purge of the archives.
But I'm thinking, it was Out of the Unknowns that they used the white robots in from the Mind Robber, or rather, they were in the Out of the Unknown story first, and then they appeared in the Mind Robber afterwards. I wonder whether that's what Simon's referring to there.
That definitely happened. Yes, you could be getting your robots mixed.
Getting your robots mixed. It's easily done.
Who hasn't? Yes. So Pamela Salem was an integral part of 2 classic Doctor Who stories, and a massive part of, no doubt, many people's childhoods. Here she is again. And yeah, keep the memories coming in the live chat. We want to know which were your favourites of her roles, and obviously as we get deeper into the story, tell us more about the high points of that as well. Could you have seen Toos or Rachel back as companions? Come to think of it, I don't know. Okay, so once again, everybody, thank you for all the engagement that we've had lately here on the channel with the podcasts and the live streams and the extra videos and everything else. Brand new podcast dropped just a few days ago. This was my conversation with our friend Will Hadcroft, telling us all about his new. It's not new. It was about a year ago, but his award-winning, poll-topping audio book there from BBC Studios. That's The Resurrection Plant. We went and did a deep dive on that on the latest edition of the Type 40 podcast. That's available across the podcatchers of your choice, or at our dedicated home feed at type40.podbean.com. Okay, what next? I think it's time to really go into the weeds on this now. We've got so many people posting pocket reviews here of the story. I think we've kept them waiting for long enough. Let's get it geared up. What have we got? How about this?
I'm Leela over 70, and you should watch Type 40.
Yes, Tom Baker.
Like she said.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that girl in a million years. The Tom Baker era is full, isn't it, of classic stories. 40 stories all in all across 7 seasons. Obviously a record-breaking stint leading our favourite TV show. But when it comes to different flavours of even Tom Baker, there's probably around 3 or 4. And whilst it's generally the perceived wisdom that the Hinchcliffe era is the best, is the most emblematic of this act of this time of the show, I accept that's not universal. But there are some stories that do seem to encapsulate a very, very precise time and to chill children so much to the very, very core that even the mention of their name is enough, isn't it? I think the Robots of Death is absolutely one of them. Now, obviously, every story, as a fan of Delta the Bannermen, I have to remind you this. Every Doctor Who story is somebody's favourite. Sarah. But the Robots of Death is one that gets mentioned constantly. We've been talking about doing a dedicated show about this for a very long period of time, and it just hasn't happened for one reason or another, because the people who wanted to be involved couldn't be, and blah, blah, all those kinds of things. There's never a bad time to talk about this story. I think you only have to mention it by name, and it can send a shiver up the spine. When did you first see it, Sarah?
Oh, God, about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was actually Simon Horton that made me.
No, yeah.
I was in the. I think I was in the Lunatics page. I was just getting into classic Who, and there's certain stories that are revered, and this one came up. Talons, pyramids. You must watch Robots of Death, and I thought it was an absolutely terrible title. I like the Robots of Death. He's telling you what's happening in the title. Little did I know about this new title.
It sounds like the epitome of everything that the detractors of Doctor Who would use as a stick to sort of beat it with, Charlotte. It just sounds like a really generic Doctor Who title, doesn't it? On one account, Sarah's right. It tells you everything, and yet it tells you nothing at the same time.
Well, yeah, like I said, you think you're just getting almost like they did the story first, and then in the last hour they thought of the title for it. They were like, "Oh, what can we actually call this thing?" But I think the robots, to be fair, are the thing that I think has lasted. It's one of the things which has sort of made the legacy of this story. Because before I watched this, I'd seen a Vok robot. Like, I knew that monster. I didn't know the full context of it. But because of that design just being so perfect and so just that lovely mix of art and fear, like it's humanistic, but it's creepy. It's pristine, but it looks a bit grungy. It's just somehow so many different things. So I sort of knew, I was like, oh, is that the story with these robots in? That was sort of, so the title works because they're the things that's really sort of caught the imagination, I think, with the fan
I suppose
base.
If you mentioned the Green Death, is that the story with the maggots? Whereas when it comes to the Robots of Death, is that the story with the robots? The answer's definitely. It's going to be yes, isn't it? Now, no one that we know of has stumbled across the secrets of time travel just yet in the real world, but we can relive the TV gold of the past, can't we? Thanks to physical media and streaming. There's hundreds of episodes of Doctor Who available at the touch of a button in multiple places now, and there can't be many people who haven't rushed to their chosen place to get their fix, John, and not jumped on one or two of a select sort of nest of stories that they've heard about second or third hand in the way that Sarah described. The Robots of Death has got to be pretty near the top, hasn't it? As a seminal Doctor Who story from probably the seminal time.
Totally. And this is up there with Pyramids of Mars for me as well. Just the two of them, just they're right up the top. And just there's so many good things about this story that, you know, I can't remember how many times I've watched this over my lifetime, but I never get bored of it. It is just so good from beginning to end. You've got Doctor just getting tetchy, you know, about, come on, what would you do? And he goes, "I'll call for a robot." You know, that bit, you know.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And it's
That's
just
one of my favourite moments.
Yeah, and then you've got the wonderful.
It's like Ian says, isn't it, John? The Doctor's the smartest person in the room, and it's not simply about regurgitating sort of facts and techno babble at a fast rate, the way that we've seen a lot of. I sound like Simon. A lot of modern Doctors have. You know, it's that David Tennant way of delivering things. The Fourth Doctor delivers that.
Yeah.
Very, very slowly, very precisely to provoke a certain reaction in Paul at the time, doesn't it?
And then it's the comedy as well, isn't it? It's about, you know, would you like a jelly baby? Shut up. You know.
Yes.
The no should have sufficed, and you know, all of that is great. And
all that time, Leela absolutely wants to deck the commander because he slaps her.
But she kicks him, though. She kicks him.
Just kick him right between the legs.
That's my point. She wants to be
right between the legs.
I've got a comment here from Rob Alexander in the live chat who says he's amazed to see Robots of Death ranked very lowly in a ranking by a couple of American YouTubers. Well, I think that all that just goes to prove is that you know, everybody's different, and you can probably find examples of all sorts of opinions out there.
So,
But generally,
I remember, what is it? I heard a scream.
I think it is.
I heard a cry.
I heard a cry. It was me. Brilliant.
I think you're right, Stan. I think the truth be told, I think if you are a Doctor Who fan, chances are you're going to love the Robots of Death. There can't be many Who fans that don't love it, because it is so quintessentially Doctor Who. And so if you like Doctor Who, it's kind of a bit of a given. You have to like the Robots of Death almost.
But do you know what, right?
Sorry, Ian.
Sorry. Do you know what, right? The thing, I watched it obviously recently. The thing that really kind of doesn't upset me, but I so wish that the BBC gave them more money, because, you know, some of the effects are not so good. They're not bad, but they're not so good. The costumes are kind of a bit way out there. I just wish the BBC had taken Doctor Who seriously and given them a decent budget to do this one, because this one is so good, and it would have been 10 times better if the budget was like 5 times more.
But do you know what I like as well, Ian?
Shame. Yeah.
Do you know what I like as well, Ian? I do like the bit where the writers are clever, where they've got the bit where they've effectively locked them up, and they basically do that bit, and they basically just are basically saying to you they've reinforced it as steel.
Yeah.
Clever writing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
It is.
See, I love the costumes in there. It wouldn't work. Yeah, because if they just got boring Sandminer uniforms on, it wouldn't have been half as good.
Well, that guy that was wearing that big thing on his head. Like, what the hell?
Most people in the live chat here go straight to the production design. People love the look of this story. If you haven't seen it in a little while, though, this is the general synopsis. It's The Robots of Death by Chris Boucher, and it's the lay of the land is that on a desert planet, a giant sand miner crawls through the howling sandstorms, harvesting valuable minerals in the sand, whilst inside the humans relax in luxury, whilst most of the work is done by the robots who serve them. Then the Doctor and Leela arrive, and the mysterious deaths begin. First suspects, then hunted victims. Leela and the Doctor must find the hidden killer or join the other victims of the Robots of Death. It was originally broadcast between the 29th of January and the 19th of February 1977. Written by Chris Boucher, directed by Michael E. Bryant, and produced by Philip Hinchcliffe. And we're going to amuse you with various sites of this classic story as we're going along too. The production design and the model work, it is of its time, Ian. I think you're absolutely right. You know, you can't mistake this. You can tell this is 40 odd years old.
Yeah.
But at the time, on TVs that were far, far smaller and far, far darker, I think this was actually part of the spell. It felt like its own world. And I think that's why, because it all seems to belong and sit very well next to itself. All the component parts, they seem like they're from the same period, from part of a culture. That's a real part of why this spell works for so many people.
Also, the sets are quite good as well. Like the bit where they come out and they see the sandstorm. I mean, that's a build right there. Yeah. And I'm assuming they used it again when they came out of the TARDIS as well. But they had a lot of sets in this 4 episodes, you know, and it's pretty good. And they did spend a bit of money on it, but again, I just wish that BBC took Doctor Who seriously. I just wish. But anyway,
what makes you think that this wasn't the BBC taking it seriously, though? Because that is, but if you look at the other stories from this era, the sets are quite sophisticated. They're on multiple levels. The costumes are quite elaborate. It's certainly well shot. Most Doctor Who then was pretty well shot.
Well, didn't Mary Whitehouse try to cancel Doctor Who because she didn't agree with this way of because she thought it's too scary for the kids. It was ridiculous. It wasn't scary for
editorially.
The kids.
It was editorially. A lot of the problems that she had were down to the choices that the script editor and producer were making, weren't they, Simon? How they were pitching it, but of course the kids absolutely bloody loved every single minute.
We loved it.
Of course we did. I can still remember when this came on, and how old was I? Not very old at the time, about 8. And I just remember that first scene. Sort of the first scene where Carol is killed by the robot of death. And I just remember that I can still remember to this day sitting there watching that. It just absolutely scared the pants off me as the eyes suddenly turn red. So Hinchcliffe and Holmes knew what they were doing. The directors that they were booking knew what they were doing, and they were going for it. They were going for broke on it. They were creating, this to all intents and purposes, this is a horror film, but just shown at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It wouldn't. You don't need to put much more blood into it, and it could have been a low budget horror film.
I welcomed it.
As we say, I think that the trick, though, to make it feel that horror, what you're talking about, is the Doctor, for a good chunk of this story, he's not been able to stop any of the events. He's sort of just trapped in them. He doesn't actually stop any of the crew getting killed. No. He barely just gets out of it himself with his cliffhanger. Yeah. So he's sort of, I wouldn't say he's underpowered because he's still the Doctor, but it feels like he's almost a victim of circumstance in this story. And I think that really adds to that horror vibe, almost. That
Charlotte, it feels like a claustrophobic watch at the same time, doesn't it? Because even though the sets are, I believe, very well designed and well thought through, it still feels quite confined.
Oh yeah, because it's the design, like you said, of the ship. It's the way, I think I love the effect of the eyes seen through the robot's eyes. That really makes you sort of electronic. And I think also it's the fact that they take the time at the beginning for you to get to know this crew.
Yes,
and
very diverse crew as well.
Oh yeah, because that didn't exist, Ian. What are you going on about?
Our collective eyes must have deceived us watching this story. So making up the supporting cast was Russell Hunter as Ivanov, Pamela Salem was Toos, but David Bailey played Dask. That's the gentleman on screen there. David Collings, who we know again from countless shows like Sapphire and Steel and other Doctor Who appearances. He was Paul. Brian Croucher, who would play the second Travis on Blake 7, he's Borg. Tanya Rogers was Zilda. Now, Tanya Rogers was the other cast member of the Joan Collins movie, The Bitch, that was in this.
I didn't know that.
I know, you learn something new every day at Type 40 Live, particularly about softcore porn. Tariq Yunus played Cass, Rob Edwards played Chubb, and Miles Fothergill, was SV7, whilst Gregory DePaulnay was D84. And that's another trick to this, in the fact that even though the robots, we never see any human faces, and they're not human voices. They're not portrayed as human beings, as kind of commander data types who are trying to pass as human. There's still that sort of separation between humans and robots. The vocal performances of Gregory and Miles there, they really add to it too. And they also add to that sense of unease that you were talking about, Charlotte.
Yeah, I think, and the story comments on this about the fact that they're human but not, so your brain doesn't like it. The sort of what we know now as the uncanny valley, that sort of gets used quite a lot. Like, this was way before its time. There's so many aspects of this, which is that feeling of they were touching on things that 20, 30 years writers would do a lot with, but they were already exploring it. But I agree. It's that voice of, like, it's not a human range when they speak, but it's just that close that it feels like a dead person talking, which I think is a gorgeous line. That's what they say in this.
I bet they decided to put weapons on the miners after this story, though.
They did.
It's very clever the way they do the choreography of the robots as well. They again, this is way ahead of its time. We think of Elsa Burke in the 2000s Doctor Who as being very key to the way monsters move, but again, they were doing it back in '77. That's a very deliberate choice to make that gliding movement so precise. And again, as you say, Charlotte, it's down to those voices. Again, I still remember in the weeks, in the month that this show was playing, I remember the schoolyard just being full of everybody was just going around, in robot walk,
strangling people,
saying kill the humans, kill the humans.
Brilliant.
That's all everybody was just walking around going, kill the humans.
I tell you,
I love that.
I tell you what though. This is my favorite Tom Baker costume out of all of them. I just love his costume in this one with the collars turned up, the tie thing, the scarf, the waistcoat. I think this is the best Doctor Who costume he ever wore, coupled with one of the best stories ever written. I mean,
Did
you
you
can't get any better than that, you know.
Did you do like me though when you went to school? You took the reflectors off your bike so they were caught.
I never thought of that.
It'd got to be done.
Watching this story in adulthood, there are different things that I notice about it. David Collins, in particular, playing Paul. I think, in fact, several of the characters, there's who they are on the surface.
Yes,
they're either sort of shouty or a bit nervous or a bit snobby, or they've all got certain qualities on the surface, but then underneath there's something else going on as well. I think that's probably something that Chris Boucher, that his stories. I mean, he only did the 3, didn't he? There was The Face of Evil, then this, and then Image of the Fendel in a very quick succession. But all of those stories, they were very, very well crafted characters that made
also,
up the
I just like to point out that, do you remember that scene? I think it's in episode 1 where they were all accusing each other of who killed someone.
That's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, that scene was solely focused on the second players other than the Doctor and Leela. And it was performed so well, right? You know, obviously they did it in one because the way they used to shoot it in those days with multiple cameras and stuff like that. And it's really well performed. And again, I hate to say this, you never get that stuff in the Doctor Who that we get today. Never.
No, you don't.
With the battle between wits and people accusing each other and stuff like that. And
I
just think it's lost now. You know?
Yeah, you wouldn't get a hard-edged scene like that, certainly, and it is good to see. And you're right, Dan. Just about every one of the characters has some hidden depth that is ultimately comes out. I think, if anything, Toos is the only one that you kind of know what you're getting from beginning to end. Every one of the other characters is duplicitous in some way. They're playing a double part, and it just gradually it gradually comes out. And it's a very adult script as well, because you get the sort of the sexual tension between Ivanov and Zilda. You know, there's stuff going on there that as an adult, I didn't get it as a kid, obviously, but as an adult, you watch it now and you're like, actually, that's a really adult storyline you're talking about there. What's going on there?
And it's only just suggested, whereas now it would be totally in your face.
Yes, it's really subtle, really subtle.
Watching it again this time, just last week, was the first time that really, really hit me. I think it's because I understand Ivanov a lot more, being probably around his age now, and understanding that he probably lived with a lot of regret and responsibility for the death of Zilda's brother. But there's also the fact, you know, he's noted, he's talked about as being quite merciless, and he's obviously very, very hard working. And you can see that all his life, he's had something he feels he needs to prove because of the class structure of this particular society. And Zilda is of a higher class, and he kind of wanted to prove himself to her on that level, to attract her attention, earn her respect and affection. So there's all sorts of things going on just in that dynamic alone.
Yes.
He ends up being really a sympathetic character, because at first he's just so much full of bluster.
Yes.
Yeah, and it does you do end up kind of rooting for him.
And also,
a lot of the others aren't around long enough to get too deeply under the skin. Brian Crouch does a lot of shouting in very few scenes in this, which is a shame, because
he was good though. He was good.
He makes a good impression. He does make a good impression. But it's interesting because again it was ahead of its time in the way that it talks about basically mental health. It talks about a complete mental breakdown. As TARDIS Travels says in the chat, one of the most horrific scenes is when Poole discovers the damaged robot with blood dripping from the hand, and he freaks out, and it literally sends him catatonic. So again, these are really adult scenes for a kids show to be tackling serious mental health issues. Was just way ahead of its time.
Thrown a tear across the room with that one.
But it also shows Leela in such a brilliant light in that moment, because she finds him and she's very sort of quick to sort of almost keen to what he needs. And she does. What I love about that scene is, if you didn't have what you said, that understanding of mental health, which is what they're talking about, it would have been, oh, just grab hold of him and take him out of the room. But she understood in that moment, no, I'll leave him. That's the better approach here. Just be quiet.
Just coming off,
because they're just her sort of being able to understand and lead people.
She's the kind of companion you want, isn't she, Charlotte? She's the companion you want around.
Yeah. Sorry, just coming off slightly. I know this is really trivial, but I remember that torch because they used to sell them. I
had that one.
The torch that Doctor Who was holding. I think I had one of them, and my one was blue. It wasn't.
We all had one.
Yeah.
I had one too. The torch that the Doctor pulls out to go looking for something. And watching it this time, I noticed how little light it actually
was rubbish.
It wasn't very good at the time.
Whereas now the light on the average smartphone is far brighter. I mean, looking at all those themes and the characters there, I do wonder, was it Chris Boucher and his instincts and what he would bring to Doctor Who in the short period of time that he worked on it, and then on Blake 7 and other shows, or was it a desire from Hinchcliffe to push the series not into growing up as such, but into getting generally more sophisticated? This was the 90th Doctor Who story, believe it or not, and I'd say its influences are very, very present, very, very clear. So I think the 1965's Dune novel, the original novel by Frank Herbert, which led to, I think there's about 4 or 5 in the original sequence of books there, that's very much in evidence, certainly visually. And I believe in the dynamic of the characters to some extent as well, as are the iRobot collection of stories that Isaac Asimov wrote through the 40s and the 50s. But the original working title for this story was The Storm Mine Murders, which probably gives away the missing component of it.
It's not better, really, is it?
It gives away what the other major influence was. It's Agatha Christie's murder mystery thriller novels. I don't know how many of them that she wrote, but there were certainly a lot of them. And this one, I think it's often mentioned as having been greatly influenced by 10 Little Indians, or then there were none, depending on when you first read the book. It goes under 2 different titles, doesn't it? But to compare it to an Agatha Christie novel, people used to use that as a stick to beat this kind of fiction with. But I think that what the structure of that kind of story and those kind of markers do bring it are because we recognize them from not another medium as such, but from another genre, Simon. It allows us to get to more interesting places, more uniquely sci-fi places, quicker, if anything, doesn't it?
Well, of course it does, and this is what Holmes and Hinchcliffe did so brilliantly with everything all the stories that they did, and they only did 3 seasons together. Tragically, as I say, we'd have loved to have had more, but that's what they did so brilliantly. Sorry, that's Lenny shaking himself, having just come in from the raid. They took those things. So John, you mentioned Pyramids of Mars earlier on. That's we're back to sort of Hammer horror, The Mummy kind of thing. So they just took those influences and they ran with them, but they ran in a completely different direction. So as a kid, I never got the Dune influences or the Asimov or the Agatha Christie. You didn't get them, but this is where I think this era of Doctor Who scores, because it works on so many levels, because you have just the sheer brilliance of something like The Robots of Death, but then because it's such a good story, you want to look into it closer, and that's when you start to unpick the layers that are there, and suddenly it all begins to become more interesting because you see where it's come from and what was going on in the brains. And that's what I think, as I say, it's very multi-layered, it's very dense, it's a dense text, as they say when they're talking sort of about literary criticism, and that's what it is, and that's why it works so well, because it's, again, like you say, John, you've watched this so many times and you never get bored of it, and it's because it is a dense text. There's so much there.
But Hinchcliffe understood the audience. He wanted it grown up enough for the kids, but also and the adults. You know, mum who sat there who might not necessarily be bothered about Doctor Who is going to get into the murder mystery bit. And you've got the heavy sci-fi stuff, and then you've got the killer robots for the kids. So it is just perfect for that family viewing. Whereas now it seems skewed. It's either dumbed down too much, or it just doesn't work because it's only focusing on one type of audience, where it literally is accessible to all.
Yeah.
I think it works as well because it takes all those, like you said, June, iRobot, Agatha Christie, and Who, like all the best elements, and distills that and then puts it all together. So with Agatha Christie, it's how she writes people. That's what people love about her mysteries. That it's how, sort of, you said, the layers of people, the idea of having a false identity almost and playing a part. That was a major thing in Agatha Christie books. Then you've got the June with the, I would say for me, the June stuff is a lot of the also stuff about capitalism and money and profit and how much you can get pushed to do things and not think about human life because of the profit margin. That's a major theme as well. And then you've got the robots with artificial intelligence and whether a robot can hurt a human and whether they should have rights. So all those things, which one of those concepts would be enough in a Doctor Who if it's written well. But to have three and a cracking Doctor Who story at the same time just shows the skill of the writers at this point, that they could do that.
But they got crucified for it, didn't they, by Mary Whitehouse, and then they got renegated, didn't they, for doing such a brilliant job. That's what I don't understand about the BBC. They're just such assholes when it comes to Doctor Who. They really are. It's just incredible that you know these two got booted out of the Doctor Who thing, and basically they were just brilliant at bringing the horror and a new look. You know what I mean? Like before, Doctor Who was
Michael Wright had been directing on the show for quite a long time. I think he did a lot of Pertwee stuff and several Tom Baker stories. Chris Boucher only wrote the 3 Doctor Who stories. Both of them would go over to work extensively on Blake 7 over a 2, 3, 4 year period and wouldn't return to Doctor Who on television. I think Chris Boucher certainly wrote a few of the BBC novels in the late 90s, including a sequel to The Robots of Death we'll come to later. But people are mentioning in the live chat here about various component parts of this, which I think really line up with a lot of what you were saying, Ian. Because in some respects, I think the vision of the Fourth Doctor, as we see in this, and that version, that medley of his costume, you know, the popped up collar,
love it.
Yeah,
it's the Fourth Doctor, right in the dead center of his era. And you've got the music as well. The music in this story and the musical cues. Just as several people have mentioned this in the live chat, they heighten the tension just enough, and they seem like the culmination of a version of the show. Just as Darren says in the live chat, the music when the robots went into kill mode burns itself in the memory. It still sounds terrifying. It's
that heartbeat, isn't it? The boom, 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 boom.
I do like that from Darren, because it's like kill mode. It's like someone's pressed a switch on each robot, just on the side.
But it is that simple. The conceit of this story is so simple, just like the production values are. It's a very precisely balanced between being very, very functional and yet very, very, very elegant.
Well, this is where a lot of the dichotomy lies with this story, because you know the original plan with this, when Chris Boucher wrote it, and when Philip Hinchcliffe commissioned it, the thought was that it would be, Sarah, you mentioned this earlier, that if they were all in Sandminer outfits, it would have been boring. But that was the original intention, that they would have been in the kind of things that, for example, they were all wearing in the Sunmay, because, you know, just bog standard space coveralls kind of thing. And that the robots would be your typical just blokes in a silver outfit and not very interesting. And that the sets, the Sandminer itself would just all be very, very industrial and silver and grey and very monochrome, and that was the original intention with it, and that's where part of the dichotomy comes from with this story, because of course they just go completely away from that. They couldn't go further away if they tried, and that of course is part of the success of it. But it is it was kicking back against what Philip Hinchcliffe and Chris Boucher had intended for the story, and so it was kind of a brave decision, really, that Philip Hinchcliffe could have said, "No, you're just going way off. You haven't got this. You don't. That's not what I want from this." But he trusted, and this again is just what makes a great producer. He trusted his director to know what he was doing, and they ran with it, and that's one of the reasons why we're still talking about it now. I genuinely think if it had gone down the original route of industrial sets and space coveralls, we wouldn't be talking about it in the same way.
So, it'd be interesting because I mean, the basic story would probably still be a strong story, but it just wouldn't be as iconic.
No. And Michael Bryant sort of said that he didn't rate the script to begin with. When he first read the script, he just didn't rate it. He thought it was very sort of second class, very hackneyed dialogue, a very cliched story. Oh, there's just a bunch of robots and they're going around strangling people. And it's odd because when you break it down to that kind of level, he's right, actually. It is a pretty hackneyed idea. It's hardly original. And yet somehow it is sort of, if you'll pardon the pun, it is the perfect storm here, because it is a combination of the script that actually might be hackneyed, but is actually quite brilliant when it's realized correctly, which is what they do with it, thank goodness. And when you look at it now, if you sort of run some of that dialogue in your head and you think, wow, in lesser hands, if it had been handled in a really poor way, it would have been absolutely awful, and we would not be talking about it now. Simple as that.
Tom mentions here in the live chat about the broken, distorted faces of the damaged robots.
Deeply disturbing.
That image as well. Yeah, whenever I see that, I do find that quite disturbing, because obviously, because the voices, just as we were saying earlier on, Charlotte, they're not human. And yet they've got just enough intonation in them that you can read into them. You can see things reflected in them that aren't really there. And so when you see them smashed up and beaten up, even though they are cheap costumes from the late 1970s, still, because the world is so well realized, it's sort of disturbing.
Well, it's another scene in that vein for me, which is obviously that scene when you see the head half smashed. It's the scene when you first see a robot get infected, and it's on the slab, and you see all the inner workings, which fully almost makes your head realize this is a robot. But then the camera pans down, and this is brilliant direction, and you see the hands doing this and freaking out. And that's such a human moment almost for this robot. And he even has to touch them and say it's going to be okay. And that's what you do to a person.
Yeah.
So in one scene, you were brilliantly realizing that thing of it's a robot, it's not real almost. But then there's such a
human touch to it.
There were lots of little moments. There were lots of little moments in this story, I think, that again, the first few times you see them, particularly when you're younger, you kind of look past them a little. But now when you see them and you spend a little more time with it, you think, I mean, not only does it affect you on that kind of deeper level, but also technically as well. You think, oh, that was, because obviously it was all done in camera, where you see the smashed up robot head there, but his arms are still working. You think, okay, there was only 2 or 3 ways that they were going to achieve that, John. But it looks, it couldn't really look any better if they'd have spent millions on CGI doing it.
It looks great, and just you see it going red. As it's coming down, and as I was saying, that it's saying program violation, and the hands are going. It's just and more than that.
and it's interesting because John Smith mentions in the chat, it's like German expressionistic films. And John, you're right. Actually, I've always thought, and I've never done this, but I've always thought, do you know what? I bet if you watched The Robots of Death in black and white, it would work really, really well. It wouldn't take anything away from it, I don't think, watching it in black and white. It would give it a really creepy, expressionistic kind of feel.
I just had a thought, black and white, but you have the red eyes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine? Yeah. Be stunning.
Could you do that, Ian? Do you think you could make us a remix of The Robots of Death? like
you know
George
what,
Miller
right?
did for Max Fury Road?
Do you know what? Right, that we talk about the story, and the story is absolutely fantastic. I mean, yeah, it's not original, but what they did with it, they took something and they mixed it and they made it look new and stuff like that. But nobody, I mean, we should talk about Tom Baker's performance in this, which is absolutely freaking awesome. Seriously, it really is. From the point where she goes, "Oh, take a weapon with me." No, you don't take a weapon with you, because if you present yourself as no threat, there won't be any danger.
9 times out of 10.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10. Do you know what I mean? It's
7 times out of 10.
Right?
He gets some great moments in this, and some of his most iconic moments and lines. Sometimes when he's not saying anything at all, just looking across at people, that exchange of energy and of mood that he contributes so much to. Other times there's some great dialogue in there, as there always is with Chris Boucher, a lot of which is so quotable. Sarah, you mentioned it earlier on. There's simply too much in this story, but obviously some does stand out. Particularly his put down.
It's one of his best.
Right? That's a classic. That one.
Savage.
Yeah. But I do like Tom Baker a lot in this one, and as I said, it's really well written as well. And he again, right? They always have a scene in it where they obviously think the Doctor is a threat, and then something happens, and the Doctor comes in and like the bit where the ship was turn off the thing, otherwise we're all going to blow up, and nobody obviously it's so obvious that he's there to help. Do you know what I mean? Rather than there to cause.
Do you know what? It's also
it.
And it's also that.
And that's classic.
Right at the very beginning is one of my favorite things from Doctor Who, and I loved it as a kid, and I love it now. And when he's explaining to Leela how the TARDIS is exactly that, and it's just trans-dimensional engineering, and it's. I love it. That's all you want. You don't need...
I love Leela's response. That's silly, because it is. It really is, but it works.
Well, firstly, I like the fact that she believes that he's given her that yo-yo to play with as part of
that's funny.
Keeps the magic working, because we never see her in the previous story, in The Face of Evil. We never see her enter the TARDIS, do we? This is the first time we see her in it, and the fact that she's doing that, and he takes the time to explain to her how the TARDIS. I mean, I love this. When I first saw this story, which was on VHS in the late 80s, this scene in particular, it has to be. In one sense, it's the cleverest and yet the simplest explanation.
Brilliant.
Almost plausible description of how something like the TARDIS, like dimensional transcendentalism, could work. Of course, you stop and you think about it. You think, God, that makes no sense at all.
But then it makes sense to me.
I think it does actually make sense.
Lords could do it.
That's the funny thing, because although it makes no actual sense as regards real science, you can still picture it in your head somehow in a kind of cartoonish way. And I think I don't know whether it was all scripted by Chris Boucher, Simon, whether anybody else brought anything to it, Robert Holmes, for example. Is there a story behind that? Because it does.
I must be honest, I don't know where that came from. I'm guessing it's from Boucher because he is a bit of a science nut. So I'm assuming it came from him. But it is just
I wouldn't describe it as anachronistic, but I think it does sit aside from the rest of the story.
So you're thinking it might be a Robert Holmes edition? It's possible. It is possible. I don't know that. Certainly, there's no documentation that sort of leads to any conclusion one way or another on that one. But it does make absolute sense if you can keep them both in the same place but in separate places. They fit inside. It's just beautifully done, and it's so simply done as well. It's just the most brilliant explanation, and you can't argue with it because it makes absolute total sense. You are left lost for words when you're thinking, hold on a second, no, but by then, of course, the moment has gone and they've moved on, so you don't have time to dwell on it and unpick it. It's one of those things that Russell T Davies, I think, would overwrite, and it would get lost, it'd get bogged down, but they don't. It's definitely thrown away.
Well, sorry, you go, Charlotte.
I was going to say, I think this scene and a scene right near the end, which I love, it just sort of really makes Tom's performance have this aloofness, this otherworldliness about it. And you get that feeling like he's not a human. he's something else. There's something
Tom
that you
Baker.
can't put. That's what,
He's
but it's
Tom
like
Baker.
oh, I know, but like at the end when Leela says, "Oh, why didn't your voice go high?" And he goes,
Oh, yeah.
"Well, my dear, I have been
Yeah,
around a
yeah.
bit longer than you," or something to that effect.
Yes.
Well, he's a
And
Time Lord.
You
He's
buy
a
that.
Time Lord. Yeah.
That,
He's
yes,
got. I think you're right, Charlotte. I think he's absolutely at the top of his game, undoubtedly, at this point. And to me, the reason he works so well is because it feels like a nuclear reactor that's bubbling away, but there's something holding it down. Do you know what I mean? It feels like there's a storm going on inside Tom Baker, but he's suppressing it all down. It's very, very carefully controlled. So there's a heck of a lot going on inside him as an actor and as a character, but it's all suppressed down. It's being contained. He's that much in control of it, but it could burst out at any second.
It's like, there's like 2 or 3 more levels above.
Correct.
He's just below, and he's not quite showing it yet. And
Yes.
like even like when he gets a bit sort of angry at times in this story, that comes across that's that bubblingness.
But
yes.
That he does get angry with the crew, and it's lovely to see a Doctor get that catty almost.
He gets impatient. He gets impatient with them because there's bodies mounting up, and whilst they don't, it's not that they're not concerned. It's just that they get bogged down with matters that are very particular to their own interests or those of the people they are working for, and that's what grates on the Doctor, I think, over a period of time. Although he does retain his sort of sense of humour, it's a drier sense of humour I think we get from the Fourth Doctor in this. Leela gets some very funny moments as well. I think that
she does.
Was this the definitive Leela this early on? I think that's debatable.
I would say it is, Dan. It is the definitive Leela simply because it's written by the person who created Leela. Actually, I think it is the definitive.
She's not. She has things to do in this. You know what I mean? It's not like she's just there on the, Bonnie Langford just screaming and whatever. She actually does things in here. You know what I mean? So, and also another thing, right? I remember when I was a kid, when I watched this, I was solely focused on Leela because I fancied her so much. But as you get older, you realize that it's more than just Leela. It's the Doctor and it's everything else. So I've seen this like about 10 times these 4 episodes. And the thing that struck me is that the Doctor never looks at her like a sexual object. No one in this episode looks at her like, even though she's wearing hardly anything. Do you know what I mean? So it's interesting when you think about that as well, isn't it? For that era, when you think about it, I know she was put there for the dads, wasn't she? In fact, every companion was put there for the dads, but Leela especially, she's one of the best companions in my opinion. So there you go.
Can I also have a shout out to the unsung heroes of this story? The guys that were in as the robots, but they had to stand still on the set. They get full praise from me.
Well, they do, and again, everything like we've said about how they move, how they walk. If none of that would have been right, the robots wouldn't have worked. They would have looked silly. They wouldn't have been convincing. They move around fantastically.
Was the design of the robots influenced by Japanese culture by any chance?
It seems that way to me. It seems a mix of various things, Simon, with the tunics and their headdresses. Kenneth Sharp was the designer on this, wasn't he? He worked on lots of shows throughout the 70s and into the 80s, but generally speaking, I wouldn't describe him as a forgotten figure, but there aren't many interviews with him, are there?
No, there's not a great deal. I mean, the design really, what was clever about this was that, again, it comes back to Michael E. Bryant as the director. As I say, he decided he didn't want to do this the way it was written. And so he thought it was all about the design. And so between himself and the designer, they came up with the idea of the 1920s look. It's art. It's all basically Art Deco. That's the idea behind it. So also, for example, the robot was inspired very much by the Maria robot from Metropolis. With the lines drawn on the face and the Art Deco hair. and the fine lines and the jaw lines. It's all very much Art Deco. The Sandminer is based on the design of the Cunard ship, the Queen Mary, from the 1930s. Again, an Art Deco. It's an Art Deco design, and also even the Art Deco designs from Miami were an inspiration for the designs. So, truth be told, it's all Art Deco. Really, that's what they're aiming for in the design. But you're right, Dan. There's a mixture of stuff in there, and you're right, Ian. There is a Japanese influence,
especially the shoes. Especially the shoes. Yeah.
It's kind of kabuki theatre kind of style in a way.
Yeah, with the bright silver tips. So many influences in there, all around. Leads me to this quote: "What you need for science fiction is a good original idea. It doesn't have to be your original idea."
Yeah, that's true. That is very true.
By Malcolm Hulke, and I think a perfect lead in to the Type 40 Live ad break, a break from all the murderous mayhem and our pearls of wisdom-ish, but not from the time travel. If your bladder's holding out, you can sit tight and be prepared for another trip back in time to 1977. TV past, TV golden moments. See how many of these you remember. If you're of a particular vintage, the rest of you can just revel in the glory of TV from the past.
The first taste tells. The first taste tells. The first taste tells you it's every bit as good as it looks. And it's the same as new Stalk SB margarine.
This is nice. What's on it?
New Stalk SB.
You see, Stalk SB is now even better, with a smooth new look and a delicious new taste. So the first time you taste it, you'll say,
New Stalk SB.
Fancy calling new Stalk SB margarine.
Ever wondered how bird's eye get a better green bean? Knowing when to pick 'em helps. We pick 'em young. Pick 'em at their juiciest. Pick 'em at their snappiest. And slice 'em longer and thicker to keep that delicious taste. You pick bird's eye sliced green beans, 'cause we don't half pick 'em.
Like a rainbow dream. Yellow, purple, red, brown, and green. Get Smarties. Smarties make you smile. Get on the Smarties scene. Lots of crunchy milk chocolate beans. Get Smarties. Smarties make you smile. Smarties. Smarties make you smile.
It's my turn to operate.
Operate?
You messed it up, Butterfingers!
It's Operation, the Mad Doctor's Game.
Take out his spare ribs for £100. Oh, you'll never do that. Don't touch your sides. Here goes his funny bone.
You need a very steady hand.
I did it. That's £200 for me.
Can I have a go?
Operation, the Mad Doctor's Game from MP Games.
Are you going to be coughing all night?
Well, I can't sit here with a bottle of syrup and a spoon.
Hey,
What? Lozenges? I've got a real cough.
these aren't just lozenges, old son. The new Vicks cough calmers. Real cough medicine. Go on.
Everything's quiet here, Sarge. Everything's quiet.
New Vicks cough calmers. Real cough medicine in solid form. Only from your chemist.
Yes, this is Type 40 Live, where we cover all things Doctor Who, the world's longest running, best loved sci-fi and fantasy TV series, both on and off screen here. I'm back with the panel. You're watching us live across YouTube, Rumble, and Facebook, because it's not all about us. We've got your comments there in the live chat too. So let us know what you think of it. Think of it all. Yeah, what did you think of our blast back to 1977 with the ad break there, everyone? I think there were particularly choice cuts there from the February of 1977. I do remember in particular the Mad Doctor's Game Operation.
I remember that. I remember that so clearly. I can still remember that line. Here goes his funny bone. I still remember that like it was yesterday.
Brilliant stuff. And I remember the Smarties advert as well. Smarties still very popular, of course.
Yeah,
still sold in every shop all over the country, John. But they get very messy, don't they? If you leave them out on the car dash on a hot day.
Oh, they do, especially when you wake up as well in the morning. They're scattered all over your bed, or is that just me?
You don't need to know about your cravings, John.
No, we don't.
It's a Dorset thing. Sorry.
We have lots of people seem to like those. Kenny Everett commercial time, says John Smith. Was Kenny in one of those adverts? Is he one of the voiceovers? I can't remember. At break time, says YW2324. Is that another robot code name that I'm not aware of? I don't know. They were very, very typical of their time, I think, but glorious.
That was fantastic. That really was the best ad break you've ever done, Dan. I really enjoyed those.
I believe that adverts were far, far richer in the late 70s and the early 80s in particular. After that, things tended to go a little bit celebrity-led. Was that Mike Batt singing the Smarties one, asks Crimpling Doubloon? It may have been. It would have been a time.
Could be Crimpling. If anybody knows Crimpling Doubloon, you would know.
Yeah, you'll know.
Yes, Smarties were always in white packaging. Fly Island.
Yeah.
They were. I think they were.
Oh, it was before my time. I don't remember white
Show off.
packaging, so.
Aren't they in hexagonal tubes now as well, rather than circular?
They are.
Yeah,
Used to be circular.
it's not the same.
Yeah, used to be circular.
And you can't pop the lids off like you used to be able
Nope.
to.
And you used to buy them back for Christmas, didn't you? The big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you have to pull the thing, don't you, to open it?
Yeah.
So you don't have the popper. You just have to pull the.
Yeah, it's not the same.
I remember. Do they still use? I remember the strapline. Only Smarties have the answer. Do they still use that one? I bet they don't.
No.
I don't know if they still advertise. They're probably not allowed to because of the sugar regulations. Alan and Paul Copley, two fabulous British character actors. They were the two coppers in the car.
Yeah.
We also saw there as spotted by Crimpling Doubloon in the live chat there, watching on YouTube. Why no Dennis Fisher? Doctor Who ads. Well, we have featured them in the past. TARDIS Travels. So you have to keep an eye out for when they next turn up again. Someone who did turn up was another cast member of Blake 7. Did anybody see who? Somebody in the live chat did. Did anybody else spot a Blake 7 cast member in there?
Yeah, it was Villa, wasn't it? Villa.
It was indeed. That was Michael Keating eating Stork on his bread, and Richard Bryars, who was the later on in the Paradise Towers, another McCoy story. He was doing the voiceover for the same advert. Well spotted, Leo Ward.
Well done.
Brilliant stuff. We had the same Operation commercial in America. Confesses Mark Milford. Was that an American accent? They probably revoiced it.
They just dubbed it. I'm sure they'll have just dubbed it.
Yeah. Simon Anthony says, I really hate adverts. I used to cut them out of shows as a job. Our TV didn't show. Sorry to bring back all the commercial horror. The 80s for you, Simon. It's nothing personal. It's nothing personal. Good stuff. So we're back here with the panel and our friends in the live chat as we recap review.
Oh yeah. Oh, something I thought about during the break. We were talking about performances.
Yes.
We need to talk about the actor who plays Dask. I can't remember who the actor is.
No, that's David Bailey.
David, because anybody else could have, really palmed that up and it would have been ridiculous by the end. And the fact that he doesn't and he plays it straight.
Do you know what, Sarah? My favourite line in the entire run of the Robots of Death is from Dask, when he's working in his bay, in the robot bay. And I think his Poole walks past and says, "What are you doing?" And Dask says, "My job." And I love that line. It's the way, you're right, Sarah. It's the way he delivers the lines. It's just so understated, that line, "my job." And yet 2 words, and he manages somehow to instill them with absolute gravitas. He's
not as good as Tom Baker's line, where, "What are you doing here?" "I'm talking to you." Do you know what I mean? That's the best line ever.
Or Dask calling the Doctor an insolent animal.
There's so many. There's so many cracking lines.
There are lots of flippant lines like that in this story. Welcome to the live chat to Will Hadcroft. He's coming late, but he says, I remember my heart being in my mouth at the age of 7 when the robot taunted Pamela Salem as Toos through the locked door, and it gradually unscrews its hand because it gets its hand stuck in the door, doesn't it? And you wonder, you see the horror on her face. Pamela Salem playing that with absolute conviction. I wouldn't say the part of Toos is a thankless role, Simon, but you're right. It is the sort of the thinnest sketched of all of them. Yet she's in it for the bulk of the runtime, and of course, this conversation is partly offered in honor of the late Pamela Salem, who passed away just last week. Good to have you back with us as well, Will. It's hard to pick a favourite of the cast of this story, but I agree with you, Sarah. I think that David Bailey is fantastic as the villain of the piece. And although it's no great surprise when he is revealed in all his painted up glory, John, he never, I don't think he ever takes the role up into the realms of the completely ridiculous. He stops somewhere short of the ceiling, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. One of my favourite scenes is when he's banging on the door, trying to convince them to open the door, and they don't know. So he's trying to trick them to get in, and it's fantastic. And then you see the reveal of him with the green paint on, and
because we see it before they do, don't we? It's very nicely done.
Yeah,
but it's interesting. It's interesting because you know, when they shot these things, it was on multiple cameras, and sometimes when you shoot something kind of live like that, actors try to act over another actor because that's just the nature of it. When you're on stage, they try to do that. But as I said, with the scene in I think it was the second episode where they were all accusing each other, they didn't seem to act over each other.
No,
they
not
seemed
at
to be
all.
quite controlled. Because if you
It's
look
an
at some of the
ensemble
old,
piece, isn't it? It's an ensemble.
If you look at some of the old Doctor Who, especially the three Doctors, when the first two Doctors meet, they're trying to shout over each other because obviously it was live. But this ensemble cast, they kind of got it right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They all allow each other the lines, don't they? They know they've all got good lines, and so they allow each other the room to deliver their lines rather than trying to outact each other. Every single one of them actually is underplayed when you look at it, apart from maybe Brian Crouch, who, as you say, Dan shouts. It's underplayed throughout.
But do you reckon it's down to the director, though, Simon? Do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. I think it is down to the director.
I can't see who else.
Yeah, I honestly think it's down to the director.
Extensively with them. Richard Brooks advises only baddies wear pantaloons.
There's that really good moment when the Doctor says, "You look ridiculous," but it's only until he says it that you realise he does. Because you're not focused on what he's doing, his performance. You're like, anybody else with green and silver makeup on and that hair would look, and he just goes with it. And
it's not just even that. He even has a line which, like, if you think about it out of context, he literally says to the Doctor, "I'm going to slowly burn your brain."
Yeah.
And like, it's such a hammy, like, if you take it out of the scene, a hammy villain mwahaha line, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this Charlotte,
you're going to get hit by my death ray. It's that sort of thing, but he does it understated.
And this, Charlotte, I think is why Michael Brighton looked at the script and said, "Wow, this is not a good script." I think he probably looked at it and thought exactly the same thing that you're just saying, because it could have been done in exactly that way. And so we're lucky that it wasn't done like that.
Simon Anthony asks how much of it was improvised. I don't really see how.
I don't think it was, because this was before Tom Baker had his ego go completely off course, wasn't it?
None of it's improvised. If you look at the scripts, it's literally all there in the scripts. None of it was improvised. I mean, maybe the odd line in rehearsal that they would have tweaked or changed or added in, but no, it's all there in Chris Boucher's script.
I think this is, seriously, hand on heart, this is one of the best Doctor Who
undoubtedly
ever made. Seriously,
no question.
Ever made. It's a really good episode.
And just jumping ahead on something as well. D84 and what happens to D84. Still heartbreaking now compared to anyone else in the show. That devastates me, that ending, because I love D84.
Go on, Charlotte.
That's such a lovely idea, though. Like, because usually you get the Doctor, the companion, and for a bit of the story, we had a robot be legitimately the Doctor's companion and follow him and help him. So it was such a lovely turn that, like I said, when his sort of ending comes, you do feel for him.
And it's even when the Doctor says to him, he says, "I think you're very important." You know, so the
Yes,
saying,
that's
I
a
value you
beautiful
just as
moment.
much as anybody else. You know,
From memory, I think the Doctor spends most of the conversation that he has, or certainly that which is kind of doing the detective work, is with D84.
Yeah.
Yes. And he forms a great companion. I mean, actually, Sam Nancy was just asking about improvisation. Actually, one of the things that they did embroider upon is the infamous "I heard, I cry, that was me. I heard, I cry, that was me." As I recall, that only appears once in the script. It's exchanged once, and they worked that out in rehearsal. That sort of gag. Which is just absolute genius, you know. Tom Baker, and the timing is perfect. But Tom is just leaving the screen as he's saying, "That was me." Tom absolutely blistering. It just goes to show, just going back to Tom ever so briefly, just goes to show you don't have to have a likable Doctor, because actually he's not a very likable Doctor in this, but he's just a joy to watch. He doesn't have to be everybody's friend.
Did anybody catch that sound effect when Leela threw the knife at the robot?
Yeah, the doing.
It was weird.
It's interesting that, you know, Ian, because I'd love to get to the bottom of this, because the story goes that doing is not in the original transmission.
Oh, really?
And they they added it onto the repeat at Christmas time to make it less horrific, to make it literally more comic, because they were concerned it's horrific. And I've never managed to get to the truth of this, because I've never seen the original transmission tapes. I don't know whether they just know going on.
In the chat, somebody knows.
I've tried really hard to find the information out. I've never succeeded. Don't know.
Peter Harrington mentions the moment as well. Again, not a great deal of dialogue is there, but at one point, Leela is looking after Toos after she has survived a strangulation attempt.
And that's a
on one of the
really big
robots.
moment, because obviously at that point the Doctor and Leela are both viewed with suspicion.
Yes.
Now Toos is the acting commander. It's specifically Leela she asked for. She feels safe with her, and she knows she's going to protect her and look after her, and it's a very interesting role reversal.
And she has a lovely line about her tribe, doesn't she? In my tribe, we say, "Go to the man with scars or who's bleeding if you are." And it's just little bits that just show.
You see, this is the thing about Leela, right? When they think about Leela, right, and years later, they will always think about, oh, she was, you know, she dressed in this and she looked like that, blah, blah, blah. But all these things that Charlotte is mentioning, that's the core of Leela. And this is what I don't understand. Why don't they remember that instead of what she was wearing?
Absolutely,
I'm just puzzled by it.
Human nature, isn't it? And I think it's the sort of the tabloid-esque quality that surrounds the Doctor Who girl in the same way it does a Bond girl. I mean, I think that's a lovely moment. And it's partly, I think, it's partly so convincing and so intimate because Pamela Salem and Louise Jameson had known one another for a few years at this point as actresses, just a few years. They were part of a program whereby actors and actresses would visit prisons and talk to inmates about the arts, about acting and about reading. And that was where both Louise and Pamela first met Leslie Grantham, if you remember the actor Leslie Grantham, who had become enormously famous, probably the most famous man in Britain in the 1980s, but in the 70s he was serving a long prison sentence, and that's where Louise Jameson became his mentor, really, and convinced him to try and become a proper actor, and Pamela Salem too. They were all lifelong friends, and that's how Pamela. I think Pamela went for the job she auditioned for Leela, and I think she initially auditioned too, or at least Grantham petitioned for Pamela Salem to play Jan, his original lover on EastEnders, and of course she didn't get that. Another actress called Jane Howe, who was in Planet of the Daleks, got that role, but Grantham continued to push for Pamela Salem to be in EastEnders with him, and they would eventually reunite in the Paradise Club, another show which I'll have to talk about another time. Go down all sorts of rabbit holes.
Listen, can I just go down this final rabbit hole, because the Timescales has commented to say that apparently the doing sound effect is not in the off-air recording from the US broadcast. So I think it is true to say that it wasn't there on the original transmission. So there you go.
Is there some sort of art villain somewhere putting that noise in on all the videos secretly around the world? Just again.
I like this comment here from Crimpling Doubloon, who likens D84 to Belal from Death to the Daleks. And I think
that's a really good shout out, Crimpling.
Very
Yeah,
good.
it is.
Very true.
Everybody.
That's it from Charlotte for another night. Thank you for your company again, Charlotte, for revisiting this classic story with us. We'll have to do a new series one next time, won't we? See you next time.
Look out for robots with glowing red eyes.
I know, I'll keep my eye open just to
Check
make
under
sure.
the curtains.
Good night, love.
Bye. Peter Harrington hopes that the Sandminer model is still around. What's the deal with the Sandminer?
No, sadly, the Sandminer model is long lost. Nobody knows where it's gone to. I've even spoken in email, etc., to various people, so like Mike Tucker, for example, who is an absolute expert on this kind of stuff. And no, it's long since lost. It was last year. I remember seeing it in the Longleat exhibition in around about 78, 79. And it was a massive model, very impressive. And it vanished somewhere in sort of the 80s. It vanished, rumoured to be literally thrown away. Yeah, rumoured to have been thrown away in a skip when they cleared out the either the Longleat or the Blackpool exhibition at one point, but no, sadly, long since gone. Unless it exists in some private collection.
So somebody must have rescued it. I can't.
Maybe.
You can't, yeah.
A really sad, sandy end. Oh, I wish
who was in charge of visual effects in this one?
Michael John Harris.
Oh, right, okay.
I think.
Also, there's a bit of a story behind the Grimwade syndrome, which is the proper name of robophobia. What's the deal with that, Simon?
The deal with that is it was originally Grimwald's syndrome, and they did it as an in-joke. Again, that was worked out in rehearsal, that because Peter Grimwade was working on the show as, I think, assistant floor manager. Of course, Peter Grimwade went on to much bigger and better things in Doctor Who. But at the time, he was I'm sure he's the first assistant director of AFM. And so they put it in as a bit of a gag. They changed Grimwald to Grimwade.
I did wonder, because when I saw the credits and I noticed Peter Grimwade, and I thought, is it coincidence?
Yeah, it's an in-joke, bless him. I think it was Tom Baker's contribution, no surprise there.
Obviously, we've got TARDIS Travels here. It says, I saw the Sandminer at the Blackpool Doctor Who exhibition. So at least it was spotted by someone.
Kicking around for many, many years and then just vanished.
Everything about this story is iconic to us, obviously, watching it several decades on. We've had years, haven't we, John, to lavish all this affection and praise on the costumes, on the models, on the performances. But I suppose it's the nature of the beast, isn't it, of producing that show, that things got chucked out all the time, or just not looked after, or given entrusted to the wrong hands.
Yeah.
Well, they chucked out episodes, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Seriously.
It's tragic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yet we've probably got some props from stories that aren't that fondly regarded, aren't we?
Yeah.
That's just the roll of the dice, I suppose, when it comes to Doctor Who. A great many people wax lyrical about this story all the time. It's easily one of the most celebrated of Doctor Who stories. Russell T Davies may not have revisited these particular creatures and this world, but it was unarguably a huge influence on Voyage of the Damned, which was the Christmas special from, what year was this, 2017? Something like that. It's the one that guest starred
2007,
2007.
2017, my word.
Yeah.
Stuck in a groove in time. Yes, so these were the heavenly hosts.
Yes.
And it's one of those things, isn't it? As soon as we saw the trailers, I think, for this story, immediately a whole generation, if not two generations of viewers sat up on the sofa in front of our loved ones and said, oh my God, the robots of death, they're back. Of course,
Yeah.
on close examination, it doesn't really look a great deal like them, but the stylings are quite similar. They're similar enough, aren't they, Simon?
Oh, I think so. I mean, look at the nose. You've got the nose. You've got the eyebrows. There you go. That's perfect.
Yeah.
You've got the mouth. You've got the chin. You've got the cheekbones. Absolutely, 100%. I think Russell himself sort of said that they were inspired by, didn't he? I don't think he tried to sort of shirk the fact that they were kind of inspired by the robots.
Nothing on
of
the
death.
original.
You're quite right. They're nothing like the original. Absolutely nothing at all.
Yeah.
A cross between the robots of death, John, and the Axons, maybe.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm very lucky to have. I've got SV7 behind me here on the shelf, and I'm very lucky to have it. It's not an original, but it's taken from the original molds. And it's when you look at the design close up, they're an incredible. It's an incredible piece of work. It was sculpted. It was specifically sculpted by a sculptress, as opposed to, it wasn't one of the BBC designers that did it. It was a sculptress called Rose Garage that sculpted them. And they used, and Peter Harrington asked in the chat earlier on, did they use? And yes, they did use literally strips of plasticine. It is that their hair is literally just strips off plasticine, just stuck on. They didn't do anything other than just literally stick these strips of plasticine on. You can see it there when you look at it. You can see what I mean.
Oh, I can now.
Yeah, see, there you go. So they are literally those old strips of corrugated plasticine.
Stop ruining the magic, everybody.
I know. We don't.
Dips and plasticine. No. But the thing is, you can say these sorts of things to me, and in all seriousness, the next time I watch the story, it'll completely leave. It'll have left my memory, and the magic will be absolutely working again. I think they are for Vanessa Law as well. She's watching on YouTube, dishing out. She's speechless, just dishing out these heart emojis. So I think that's a good thing. That has to be a good thing.
Do you think the robots were? It looks like they were meant to be designed as angels, but robot angels, because they have an angelic kind of face, don't you think? But yeah, but they look very serene.
Well, I suppose you could say,
and that's what's scary about them, right?
You could say that the cheekbones and that kind of
big eyes,
idealized version of what a human being could aspire to. You could read that into it, probably.
I mean, even the lips and the nose and the big eyes and stuff. Kind of, very angelic kind of thing, but more like a robot than anything. And that's the beauty of the design, right? Because they look so angelic. You never thought that their eyes will grow red and they'll try and throttle you. But
and absolutely, again, it's a directorial choice. That was what they were doing. They were leaning away from it to wrong foot you.
It was the Hitchcock way of introducing villains. Because Hitchcock always had good-looking villains, didn't he?
Yeah,
he never had someone that had a scar in their face with a patch in their eye. You knew they were a villain, but they were always good-looking in his films. And I guess this is kind of they look angelic, don't they?
I hadn't put that together, but I suspect that's probably part of it, because there is something. For all that we talk about Christie, there probably is something sort of slightly Hitchcockian about this. We haven't got any actual shower curtains, Sarah, but we do have sort of the flapping of fabrics, don't we? And lots of POV shots.
No, it does make more sense now you've said it. Yeah, I think absolutely that was a style choice. But the more you watch it and talk about it, the just more you discover about it.
And the more you admire it.
Yeah.
You really could. Leo Ward says he never understood why the Vox have never had a follow-up appearance, given the huge popularity of the episodes and the iconic design. Fair comments.
You wonder though, don't you, Dan? Maybe it's just as well that they never have returned to them, because actually, in all honesty, it's incredibly unlikely, certainly in today's Doctor Who, that they would come close to getting anywhere near to the robots of death in brilliance. And so it's probably best.
And I think you'd have to go bigger.
Still left. Well, this is it. They would. For years, we felt the same way about the Zygons, John. And then we got Zygons in New Doctor Who, and
we wish we hadn't.
They're divisive. I personally like the new series Zygons.
Okay.
But they are divisive, and I completely understand why. I don't disagree with everything that you say about them, Simon. But so really, I think if they were to do that with this world and to revisit again, I think simply too much time has passed. There have been sequels in the expanded universe in print. Chris Boucher himself, in fact, wrote Corpse Marker. This is one of the most well-respected of the BBC books from the late 90s time when they took the license back from Virgin. They were called, by this point, they were called the PDAs, weren't they? The Past Doctor Adventures, John?
Yeah, that's right. Still got that one. It's okay as a novel. But going back to what I was saying, if you brought them back to the TV series, my thoughts on it would be you'd have to go bigger. So you'd have to have it like a planet where they're going amok, they're going awry, and then that budgetary wise, that's just going to be ridiculous, isn't it?
Kind of in the same way that Planet of the Ood expanded on the characters that were originally featured in the Impossible Planet 2-parter from series 2.
Yeah.
I would do very little changes to them if I was,
Well, you wouldn't do any changes to them.
Well, some you'll do.
But they would. That's the problem. They
That's
would.
what I'm saying. But even if I was in charge, I would just do very little changes to them because you can't change their face. It's such a classic
totally.
thing,
Or they do something horrific like make them fly, like the Cybermen.
And also that they would forget the whole idea. They would have female voices for the Vox as well.
Good point.
They're not, there's no gender or anything. It's just literally that voice, that same voice for each one.
Yes, yes, definitely.
I think we're going to start upsetting one another now. The Doctor and Leela did face off against the robots again in The Sons of Kaldor by Andrew Smith, another great writer from Big Finish a few years ago now. This is around series 7 or 8 of the Tom Baker stories. I've not heard that one. But I think
has anybody in the chat listened to him? Because the Vox, there's such a visual, creation. Does it work on audio?
Well, the other thing I think, Sarah, is for me, and I don't know who plays the robot voices in that Sons of Kaldor, but for me, it simply wouldn't work without Miles Fothergill.
Well, Gregory de Paulnay is still doing it.
Oh, he's back, is he? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the spin-off series that expands on that entire world here, and this is just one of several pieces of cover artwork that make up. I think there's 4 or 5 volumes in the Robot series. I've not heard any of these, but you can see David Collins was back, as well as Pamela Salem, along with Nicola Walker and Claire Rushbrook, again, very well-respected actresses too. Yeah. And there's Pamela Salem again, reunited with one of the fearsome robots of death. She looks terrified.
Listen, that is one little. If I have to have a quibble of this story, it's how it ends, because it does end rather abruptly. And like, what happens to Paul? Does he get better? I suppose this is what
gets better. He gets better.
You don't find out. I presume they get rescued, but it was a mess. Just laid there, and he was this agent. Like, what happens to him? So it's nice that.
There's part of me though that I like where the fact the Doctor's gone. Right, I've done my bit now.
Like, bye.
I'm off on my journeys now.
Well, we have to remember that the Doctor's not human, and he does things like that. So he has a very different outlook to us, doesn't he?
Yeah,
I've got a quote here from Chris Boucher on this, and we've read this out several times in past shows. But he said, if you try and tie up everything neatly at the end, it feels as though you've tried to tie up everything neatly at the end, and because life is like that, I don't think stories should be either.
Yeah.
Maybe got a point.
I think that is a clear point that is unarguable. But I have to say that generally speaking, I think that watching it this time, as much, and I loved watching this again this week. I don't know how many times I've seen this story. It has to be a couple of dozen. I loved it, but I did feel watching it this time that, particularly the age that I am now, and having latched onto the characters in the way that I did, that the reason why I think it falls short of perfection is actually the conclusion to the story, just as you said, Sarah, I think because it's so character driven. I generally speaking, I agree with Chris Boucher's point, but in this instance, because all the themes are very, very human of greed and the struggle with class and obsession and work ethic and what it is to be human. I think that it's I can't agree with Chris when it comes to this story. We've left poor Paul with robophobia, a gibbering wreck. Uvanov and Tusa are in a crumpled heaps on the floor. It just seems it's bad enough. I think that we saw Borg die off screen, Brian Croucher's character, an indignity. But then again, the story has to keep moving along. But I think in the case of Ivanov and Tusa, particularly Ivanov, who's evolved so much, and Tusa we spent so much time with, I think it could have been revisited later on in the story. I would have happily have lost actually a little bit of the runaround elsewhere to have given us more of that. So I think Boucher's wrong in this instance.
So what you're saying, Dan, is you wanted to see kind of a payoff scene. Just
this is what makes it unique, right? It makes the episode unique.
In my view, it actually spoils the ending.
It's because it was made such a big point of Paul getting robophobia.
Yeah, and then it goes nowhere. It's kind of dropped.
It's like they just forget about it.
I think the assumption is, I think the assumption is that at that point, no, he's lost. He's all but dead, and the Doctor can't do anything about it, and clears off. And as we've said so many times in this show alone, Tom, more than any other Doctor, is not human.
He does it a lot. He does it in several stories before and several stories afterwards. But I think it would have been, even if he wanted to leave, I think perhaps he would have indulged Leela. Leela would have demanded.
It's more noticeable in this story than otherwise.
I like it. I like it how it ends. I do personally. I like it.
So do I.
But I would say that if we were doing it as new Doctor Who now, what you would probably have is they would have probably put in a scene like a few years later where they materialise at the hospital and he's making a full recovery. That's what they would do now. But I like how they get in the TARDIS and go.
It's a very unique 4-episode. I don't care what anyone says. This is a very unique 4-episode, and I noticed it immediately when I first saw it. And I welcome the ending because it doesn't. That it doesn't give you what you want, I mean, the Doctor's the Doctor,
I think
right?
this is what it is. I think it's
this is the thing.
Just like bye,
because this lines up. This lines up with Gary's comment in the live chat here. Gary Akers, the retro doc, who says there was too much tragedy and loss during the story that a happy ending would be inappropriate. Now, I want to clarify. I'm not suggesting that.
I know. Yeah,
and that
you made it
need
clear.
be. No, I'm not suggesting that need be happy at all. That I wanted things to be made better. But I just think a few characters, even if Paul had been stretchered off, I'm not saying it needed to be upbeat. That's the difference.
I get it.
But you
just wanted a payoff. You wanted a payoff.
This is the difference between British sci-fi, right? British sci-fi stuff, right, and the American stuff. If this was an American show, they would have had a rounded off ending, and it would have been. But British people seem to have that, that let's upset them ending. You know what I mean? Look at Blake Seven, for God's sakes.
I know. So, I feel that the themes of this story are so strong and run through the entire thing all the time that not to revisit them to
I get it. I get it. I have to be honest, Dan. I think you make a very good point. I've never really thought about it before. It's never bothered me, but I see what you're saying, and I think it's totally valid. You don't want a happy ending, but you do just want to literally. You want a parting scene that just signs off those characters. It doesn't have to be a happy scene, just a sign off.
See, in my head, ever since I first watched it to now, I always think, well, they've sent up that distress beacon.
Yes, that's what I think.
And they've been rescued, and that's it. That's in my head. That's what I've always had.
That's my head too. It's left to us then to imagine. What happens next, which is good.
I think what Dan is saying, and I do understand, is that just sort of stepping out of the fiction for a moment, you feel, Dan, I think that you sort of invested your time in those characters for 4 episodes,
and that world.
Yeah.
Forget the narrative. You just wanted to, as a viewer wanted to say goodbye to them, in effect, I think is what you're saying, isn't it?
Something, as I say, we know that a flare goes up. We know this. We know that. We don't see it. So functionally, the you could say the writer met all of their responsibilities, discharged their responsibilities. But there's something else. There's something else underneath it, because this story exists. It's kind of like a Big Brother kind of microcosm of the different classes to this particular society. It's like the Big Brother house is. They're all under surveillance, so much so that we feel that we are too, and we're sort of part of it. And I think that some people could be not just children being scared. I think this would actually hit home for a lot of people in adulthood as well. And this is something, this want and this realization that it falls just a little bit short because of that is something that I've only, the last couple of watches, that it's really, when I'm reflecting and I'm feeling this way, thinking, why do I feel this way? Because I don't want I don't want the story to change. I think the solemnity is appropriate. I like how immersive it is, how balanced it is. And I wouldn't have wanted those adult themes turned up. I like the fact that it's still at its heart a runaround, murder, mystery, adventure. I wouldn't want it any other way, but I think it wouldn't have taken too much extra TLC or money to have just spent.
I mean, does anybody know if they ran out of time or there was an ending written and they couldn't do it? I don't know.
No, they didn't run out of time. There was no additional scene. There's nothing cut out there. Nothing at all.
I like the ending.
It's interesting that Dan, you brought that up, because I wondered if it was just coming from New Who, where generally speaking, apart from Stephen Moffat, things do usually get tied up nice and neat. And I think I'm just out of my comfort zone. But I remember watching it, I'm thinking, this is a bit abrupt. But
it is abrupt.
As people point out, it is a recurrence with Tom Doctor in particular.
I wonder if they address it in the Big Finish audio. I know it's not the episode, but I'd be surprised if they didn't drop something in about it. I'll have to have a listen and
I think that could be something. There are several audiophobes, never mind robophobia. We've got a couple of audiophobiacs here on the panel this time, but I think I'd like to kind of go back to that world, and I think I'm going to look at getting some. I have actually got some of them. I've got boxes of Big Finish CDs upstairs, some of which I haven't even listened to, so I'm going to have to get stuck into those. The Robots of Death has unsurprisingly been a big hitter on physical media, on the various forms of media we've had over the years. So the Target book, God, I love this cover so much. This was published first in May of 1979 with an audiobook coming in 2018. The colours, they look so wrong, and yet it's so right. I remember seeing this in the bookshop, Simon, and making a beeline for it because I'd seen pictures. I couldn't remember seeing this story. I probably did, but I couldn't remember seeing it. But those robots, I'd seen black and white images of them in Doctor Who Weekly, had to have this book. Do you know much about the artist on this one?
It's Geary, isn't it? What's his? John Geary is the artist on it, and he also did things like he did the Ribos operation. And Image of the Fendal, and so it's very sort of pop art. This is, you know what I mean? And of course you're right. The colours of the robot are all completely wrong because we get a gold robot instead of green.
We've gone back to the Bee Gees with this, haven't we?
and sadly, it isn't a good book. It's not Terence Dix's finest book by any means. It's only 109 pages long. He really rushes this one through, and you kind of think, wow, how could he not really revel in writing the Robots of Death? And he doesn't. He skips it through as quick as he possibly can.
It's a slim tome. The very first time I was able to experience the story again properly, though, was on VHS. It was released originally in the April of 1986. In this edited form, and this has, as simplistic as this cover is, this is one of the covers originally designed by Sid Sutton for the fledgling BBC video range, with the simple copy and paste, step and repeat robot there.
Yeah, brilliant.
At the time, people used to take the piss out of these covers, but now I love these, John.
I do, and like I say, that was the one I had with Death to the Daleks, and I think because mine was the abridged version or unabridged, so they made it a movie format, so you didn't have
That's right.
the episode breaks, did you?
That's right.
And I used to sit there for ages, you know, with me my Kit Kat, my wagon wheel, and my orange squash. I was all right.
Brilliant.
Happy
Orange
days.
squash.
Yeah.
Orange
Rock and roll, aren't I?
It was
Yeah,
eventually
That's
released.
brilliant, John.
It was eventually released completely uncut 9 years later in 1995, along with some of the other early VHS releases. A DVD came in November 2000. A special edition DVD in 2012 as part of one of those revisitations box sets they put out. So they keep going back to the well on this story and keep upgrading the artwork. I mean, that DVD cover is bloody awful. That original one.
But let's not forget, Dan, that was the very, very first regular Doctor Who DVD release.
After 5 Doctors.
Yeah, they'd done the 5 Doctors at that point, but that was kind of a special sort of a trial release, as it were. So the Robots of Death was very tellingly the story they chose for the very first kind of regular, traditional, however you want to describe it, release of Doctor Who on DVD. You know what? Wonder why they chose the Robots of Death? Can't imagine. Maybe it's just because it's just one of the best stories out there.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question? So you know when Tom Baker put the hat on the robot and he put the scarf on and then how did he get his scarf back at the ending? Because he gets Leela out of the thing, doesn't he? And as they're walking, he's got his scarf back again. I'm like,
well, they just popped it. They just had to wander around the Sandminer, didn't they? And they found it in the corner of the corridor.
What about his hat?
That's the other scene that Dan. That would have been in the scene that Dan wanted to see, where they were saying goodbye.
Yeah.
He could have been off doing that. He could have been off doing that, and Leela could have been with Ivanov.
I guess.
Yeah.
Right up to date. You can get the Robots of Death as part of this.
Oh yeah,
this wondrous season 14 box set, which was released in May 2020. That's when this. Wow,
I need to get that. I haven't got it.
That long ago. Wow.
I haven't got
Time
it.
flies.
Still get it. Still buy it. On rate, you can't get the limited edition packaging, but it's still available on standard form from just about everywhere. Only about 30 quid, something like that.
Part of the standard edition. Yeah. It's an incredibly important story. I think you're right, Simon. The fact that they've put it out there to test the waters in a sense, really, for the DVD and the VHS range when they were just launching, that's probably a big part of it. And the characters of the robots, so distinctive. It's understandable that in the expanded media they keep being revisited in that way. Yeah, it's got a comment here from Heretic who says if you cover any audio story, you should announce it here or on the social media so people can also purchase it or listen along for the discussion. Maybe we should. I say we only really do deep dive reviews on certain select stories here on the live stream, but maybe that's something we could take on board for the future. I think that would be. I think that
also,
would be a good idea.
Also, I just like to say that when each episode starts and you see the TARDIS and it flies in and that circle thing, as a kid that used to scare me. And it's like it's not a nice color either. It's like purple and gray and and then at the ending when the credits are going up, that as a kid that used to scare me.
100%.
Yeah, that's all gone now, isn't it?
It was a scary show in those days. It was a scary show. It's not a scary show anymore. It's as simple as that.
It was an easy watch. It was I would describe Doctor Who as being a place that we go to
be scared.
You're uneasy. You would be taken there. It's like, okay, kid, grab your cheese on toast, get behind that sofa for the next 20 minutes. It's touching cloth time. The Robots of Death is also still available to stream on the Whoniverse Hub, on the iPlayer. That's where you can find that, if that's all working or present and correct, on the iPlayer in Great Britain. And you can stream it to here at ITVX as well. Quite bizarrely, that's... I have to mention this because I know a lot of people do use these streaming platforms, John.
Yeah, not me.
You've got Sky. You've got.
I had no idea that it was still on ITVX.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, they got the BBC. What was it called? The other BBC app?
The other one. That's
Yeah,
it,
that's it.
BritBox. But the thing
Yeah.
is that the quality is still not good on those versions. When I streamed one of them a couple of weeks back, I was just horrified
the
by the
original
quality.
Yeah,
it's like,
there's varying degrees of quality.
yeah,
Depending
it's
on
not
what you
good.
watch.
Just got this image of Simon about to plug a microphone into SV7 tonight and go hunting Vox.
Don't think I haven't done it, John. I have tried it on. It does fit. It does fit.
Rob Alexander says, odd that the VHS was U-rated, whereas the DVDs were PG. Were the extras more adults? That it could be the case, actually, that somebody swore on one of the extras or something.
Probably Tom.
Or maybe the doing was still in there, and that's why I get PG.
The Robots of Death is available pretty much in whichever format you could possibly wish to get it. A big chunky box set, or you can stream it there on whichever app that you use. Let us know in the comments. It is a dense story. It clearly means as much to you as it does to us. Did we cover your base, though? Or if something strikes you in the meantime, let us know. Get back to us in the comments. We'll get back to you. Then you can get back to us. That's how that tends to work, isn't it, Sarah? There will be more reviews here on the live shows. What and when, we're not entirely sure. We'll have to get back to you on that one as well. We've got a few things in the pipeline, but you'll have to wait and see. Lots more coming up too, though, over on Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast. That's, generally speaking, the home of our reviews of Classic Who, New Who, and or New Who coming up in May. Of course it is. Yes, let's not forget that this has been offered as our way of honouring the late Pamela Salem, not just for her 2 roles in Doctor Who as Toos and Professor Rachel Stenson later on in Remembrance of the Daleks, but all the other shows that we saw her in as we were growing up in the 70s and the 80s, or rediscovering her work later on streaming or on physical media. She definitely will be missed. I think that's
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah, one of the greats. Yet another one gone.
Yep.
That cursed doctor is interfering with my plans, but I will destroy the universe. He won't be able to stop me, but you might, if you watch Type 40.
Love it.
Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. Yes, we're not going to rush off without saying goodbye like some ignorant Time Lords. They're waiting for us, but as ever, we're rounding things off with a last look at the view screen and our regular eye into the temporal schism in search of the prettiest of pictures from out there in the Whoniverse. I'm talking fan art, whether it's traditional art or digital art, could be a cosplay, for example, or crafting, whatever they're creating when it comes to the worlds, the universe of Doctor Who. We want to know about it. So if you are a fan artist, you create anything Who related, like Tom from T-Dwarf Productions, for example, then let us know where to find you. We'll get your work up here on the view screen for us to get stuck into as well. Okay, so what's first? How about this? You might want to check behind the curtains. Oh, here comes one of the Robots of Death.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Pen and ink drawing there from Ian J. Clark, which now I love the simplicity of this. It's got that old school fanzine feel to it, Simon.
Yes, totally, 100%. That's exactly the kind of thing you would have seen on the cover of Cloister Bell 13 or something like that back in the mid 80s. It's brilliant. So, is that? Do we know that's a physical piece of art rather than digital? Is it?
Yes,
Is that?
Yeah, it's
yeah,
completely hand drawn.
The hand is just great on that, isn't it?
It's like being in bed and suddenly finding it in front of you in the night.
Yes.
I'll sleep well tonight.
And there are several versions of this that Ian's put up on his art page. Some in colour, some in black and white, and a pencil one. But I think this is definitely the best.
Oh no, this looks really evocative, and I think it adds weight to what Simon was saying about how good would this look in black and white. I think
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Mhm.
It's quite understandable. The robots have been a major inspiration to fan artists
Yeah.
over the years. And next up is this one from Andy Lambert. Again, a traditional piece. This is painted on canvas. And one, you've got V5 holding the dreaded corpse marker. He's coming for you. He's gonna whack it on your brow.
That's
Going to put it on your bicycle.
I want that back on my BMX.
And Andy, bless him, Andy used to do the covers for my fanzine back in the late 80s. So Andy's been doing artwork for literally decades. That's just magnificent. That's just beautiful. And I love the fact that he's got the that set dressing in the back, those weird things that are on the recreation room set.
Yeah. It looks a bit like steampunk. I really like that.
You're right, actually. It's got that look, hasn't it?
But it's the colour, just the eyes, the red of the eyes, the coat marker, it just really
Fantastic.
pops. Yeah,
I wonder whether I'd have to think, and I'd have to think very, very carefully about this as to whether is the Robots of Death the first time we sort of see baddies where their eyes go red. Because there's lots of other baddies or monsters, or whatever, with red eyes. Wondering whether the Robots of Death is the first one.
There? Oh, because this was before Talons of Wang Chiang, wasn't it?
Yeah, just before the story before. I'm intrigued.
Yeah, let us know. Instagram and X at Type40 Doctor Who, or in the comments section. Red eyes. Doctor Who. When was the first lot? Yeah, great piece there from Andy Lambert. Next up, we've got this one from friend of the show. I think we can call him that. This is from Daryl Joyce. His cross-section of the Sandminer. I love this one. I don't know if Daryl is still up or if it's past his bedtime, but this is a wonderful kind of Jerry Anderson feel to it, I think, Sarah.
Oh, it does. Oh, it's gorgeous again. And yeah, Daryl, you do such a brilliant job. The detail on it. I want a Sandminer.
It's just incredible.
That looks as wonderful as Stingray and the SUV and all the iconic models.
And if you look really, really closely towards the nose of the Sandminer, you can see the TARDIS. Just next to the red line.
Yeah, got it. That's exactly what I was looking for, Dan. Was where is the TARDIS? And you're right, there it is.
Very clever.
Daryl, you little tinker. Yeah, I love this one. Daryl is here. He is here in the live chat. Oh, he says, "Can you see the TARDIS?"
Yeah, we've got it now. I love as well, right in the centre of the picture, the silos that at the end of episode 1, when the Doctor gets locked in one of the cylindrical silos.
Oh, yeah.
Those are there right in the middle.
Oh, we didn't mention that when the Doctor was in prison, the Doctor and Leela have got those metal straps around their hands and their neck, and it's a special kind of metal that that seals itself, even though it looks like the kind of thing that Pan's people used to wear around their waist. even though it looks like that, it's absolutely not. It's a special
disrespectful, Dan.
Rude.
Yeah, rude.
Because
I really love how they sell that.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so malleable.
Well, once I heard that, you see, I did that thing, Sarah. Once I heard that, I thought, oh yeah, fine, I'm convinced that'll do for me.
There you go. It's all in the acting. It's all in the acting.
Richard Brooks says that it's like an SPV from Captain.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, that's what I meant, Richard. I said SUV instead.
You're close enough. You're close enough.
There, you think of Torchwood, love?
Yeah.
Love it. Daryl says Richard Brooks. Ian?
I'm just saying that the design is very unique, isn't it?
It's beautiful.
It's quite very unique. I've not seen a design like this before as a ship.
I like the way the sort of the bridge, the cockpit, whatever you want to call it, to the top end. How it's got that kind of it's a sort of lozenge. But on screen it looks like a rectangle. It looks like an eye. I think that's why I like it. Reminds me of Deep Thought from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
I love as well. I always loved the Archimedes screws at the front that give it some movement, because otherwise it would be a very static prop. But I remember I mean, I know, Ian, you were sort of criticising at the beginning some of the special effects, but I remember as a kid just being blown away by the model work in this story. I just think it's incredible model work, and it was a big old model as well. The set that they put it on was about 20 feet square. The surface of the planet, the sandy, rocky surface. It's about 20 feet square. That set. It was a big old model. And a big old set, the Sandminer was about 3 or 4 feet long. It was a big model that they built.
The reason why it looks so unique is it isn't kit bashed, is it? This
completely
model. So it looks very unique. It's quite nice.
Yeah.
It's totally original design and an original build.
Yeah.
Lastly, we're going to return to the world of Doctor Who in print. Only a few minutes ago, we talked about the Target book and this striking cover there with Tom Baker with Colin Baker's hair. Bright green background there on the Robots of Death artwork from 1979. This was published, wasn't it? So I love this with the white spine and all the rest of it. Just 70p. And this artwork has inspired another artist to emulate this style exactly, and to put a Target cover to a new series story. We've got Robot of Sherwood done an exact courtesy.
I love that.
Here, which I think is really nicely done, with the Doctor holding the sonic screwdriver there, John.
Nice.
And one of the robots from that particular story from 2014, wasn't it? They're recreated in that same golden pattern, mottled pattern that the Vok robot was on the original cover. What do you think of this, John?
Oh, I love it. I mean, these people are so clever with these things, because I love that. It's just
it's very clever.
It is. It works well.
Peter would love that as well. I wonder if the person met him and gave him a copy.
I hope he's
would
seen
appreciate that.
Yeah, being a Doctor Who fan, you hope he's seen that. He'd love that, wouldn't he? Because he would have had the Robots of Death book when he was a kid, undoubtedly.
Absolutely.
It's likely the fans are doing the best work. That's Mark Milford.
They always do, Mark. They always do.
Yeah, well, I really like this one. In fact, it makes me want to go and watch the Robot of Sherwood.
No, surely not.
Unfortunately, the Robot Knights weren't quite as good as the Robot.
I do like how Steve has only had a 20p price increase here on the Robot of Sherwood book. It's gone up from 70p to 90p there on the back.
If only everything had only gone up by that much.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's cool, says Richard Brooks. And we've got smiley faces. And what else? What else have we got? Yes. Oh, and Gary Akers also noticed the price increase there.
Yeah.
As one would expect.
It's got to be said as well, just flipping back to the previous one, just for one tiny second, Mark Milford says, and it's a very good point, that the Sandminer beat the Sandcrawler in Star Wars by months. And isn't it bizarre? But yeah, it's a very similar design on a very similar planet, and yet the Robots of Death gets there first.
Yeah.
Again, Doctor Who. Yeah.
Leading the way.
Pioneers.
Absolutely leading the way. Yeah, and this the last story in which we saw the secondary console room? No, it can't have been, can it? No.
Yes, it is, because it doesn't appear in the Talons of Weng Chiang, and then it's gone.
Yeah, there's no TARDIS scenes in Talons, is there?
No, none at all in Talons. So that's it. Yeah, so that is the last time you see it. Very sad, isn't it?
Who designed this one anyway? Does
Harry Newbury.
Oh, right.
Who had also designed an Unearthly Child right back at the beginning, not the original console room, but the original story. So
Right. It's a favourite of mine, definitely.
Yeah.
Let us know what you think of the secondary console room too in the comments section. And as always, if you're an artist of any description, whether it's 3D or 2D, whether you look at it, whether you display it, or whether you wear it, let us know. We'd love to see. Give us the directions, the address to your website, your DeviantArt page, your IG account, wherever it is that you show your work. We'd love to see it. Get it up on the view screen for everybody else to have a good look at as well, because, well, we're nosy like that. But it's a great way, too, of celebrating fan art in all its forms. Marvellous. This has been Type 40 Live and the Robots of Death in honor of the late Pamela Salem, who passed away just last week. We've had some fantastic comments in the live chat. Lots of comments about Pamela, about her various roles, not just in Doctor Who, but everything else. Thank you so much for those, and all your memories too about this fabulous Doctor Who story that she appeared in 1977. The Robots of Death. Keep them coming. Get in touch with us through our social media, Instagram and X at Type 40 Doctor Who, or you can join us in the Type 40 Facebook group too. There now, not all of these reprobates are members of the Type 40 Facebook group. That's the disclaimer, but this is very much the spirit of that community over there. So go over and let us know your thoughts there about Robots of Death, whether you've seen it umpteen times or whether we've spurned you into watching it for the very first time and completely spoiled it for you with our conversation. You can join us again, I card you, next week at same time and space for more hot takes, cold shoulders, pet peeves, bouquets, or pot shots here on the next Type 40 Live. Heaven knows what we'll be rambling on about. Only one way to find out. I think you probably know how to do that, so I'm not going to remind you. What a great show! At last, we've done it.
Before I go down, I just want to point something out. I'm going to put my Simon Horton hat on for a minute, if I can. Well, today is the 29th of February. So it's a leap year. Do you know how many stories of Doctor Who have been broadcast on the February 29th?
Oh, that's a cracking one.
No, I have no idea.
Yeah.
I complete guess. I'll pluck. I haven't got a clue either. I'll pluck a number out of the air. 3.
Oh, there's only been one.
One. Go on. What is it?
Oh, and it linked back to your diary last week because it was Marco Polo. It was the second part, The Singing Sands. And it was 29th of February 1964.
Wow.
So a trivia for you.
That's a cracking one. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm going to bask in the glory of what you feel every week now.
The power.
Well done, sir. That was really, really interesting one. That I like that one. Well done.
Daryl just got it. Only one.
Oh, he got it. But we needed to know, Daryl. You didn't guess which one it was. Be honest, Daryl. Did you know it was Marco Polo episode 2? We need you to be honest now, Daryl.
Excellent stuff. Yeah, at last we've got the Robots of Death in the books, but we're all ears and eyes for your comments in the comments section. As always, let us know what you think of that story and which of the expanded media adventures in comic strips, on audio or in print you think we should visit to kind of get our best idea of where it could have gone had they revisited it on screen at some point, or simply to spend more time with those characters in that world. The expanded universe isn't for everybody, I know, but I think that depends on the writer. I think, John, you listen to your stuff as well, don't you? Depends on who's doing it, I suppose, whether it works for us or not. Many great comments this evening, everybody. Thank you so much. If you're lots of people catch up on this show, of course, after the fact, do some real time traveling, and they're those who join battle with us in the comments section later on. Off we go. Thank you, everybody, for your company. John, it's great to have you back, mate. Hope you can make a return visit sooner rather than later.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you. It's been great being back. It's good to see you.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you.
Very happy to have you back. Look.
Cheers.
Ian David Diaz, mate. You've
we didn't really want him back, but he just
came back
anyway.
I know that's some of the things that I ask Ian to watch.
I thought Ian was going to do something then that would change it from Universal to PG and upwards.
Ian, I'm very pleased to have given you something you would enjoy watching.
I love it. I just love this era, and Tom Baker was at his time. He was at the top of his thing. And
it's the best.
He really was. So it is one of the best. And as I said, I'm not lying when I say it probably is one of the best Doctor Who.
Undoubtedly, undoubtedly.
Ever.
Hasn't
Not
got
even
many.
new stuff could beat it.
Hasn't got many that are above it.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine how many times I've seen this, Sarah. As I say, I first saw it properly on VHS in that edited form that John was talking about earlier on. Back, I think it was in the late 80s that I picked it up. I always used to decide which ones I was going to buy based on the cover, really. And you know, it was, I think it was about 8 or 9 that were out originally. Sort of which one do I get next or first or whatever. But every time I go back to it, I see something different or something alternative to what I've seen before. Most of the time it does complement it in some way, despite my peeve about the ending. Generally speaking, I still think the Robots of Death is fantastic, and I think I may go back and watch the commentary or something, Sarah. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I'm going. Yeah, again, there's just so much to discover about it, and it is with every watch. There's always something, and there's not many stories that have got that ability, and certainly not many New Who stories. So yeah, Classic Who is where it's at, definitely.
Watching it again, you realise how battered that prop for the police box is. When they come out, you can see it's almost fallen apart, the whole thing. It's a shame.
Those are the days.
Yeah.
I haven't been battered by this conversation, though, Simon. So much gold to be unearthed, isn't it? Just like a sand miner, we're there mining for gold. We've definitely come back with the goods, haven't we? After this, it's not our longest show. I think it's our longest for a little while.
And we've been talking about doing this for so long. We nearly covered the Robots of Death last week in the diary, because of course it is exactly 47 years ago last week that episode 4 was first screened. So actually, it's very, very timely that we're covering it when we are. And we nearly did it last week, and we decided not to. And then here we are a week later doing the whole show. And I'm going to leave you actually with 2 very, very small, tiny, interesting little facts on the Robots of Death. The viewing figures, the average of the viewing figures for all 4 episodes of this were an incredible nearly 13 million viewers on average. Watched all 4 of these episodes, nearly 13 million viewers. And my favourite fun fact from this story is that one of the reviews at the time described Yuvanov's costume. We talked about the costumes. Described Yuvanov as looking like a cross between Steptoe and Liberace, wearing a lampshade on his head. So I'll leave you with that image on the Robots of Death.
That's very accurate. That is.
It is very accurate.
There is something of old man Steptoe on that bombshell. I think it's time for us to pull the lever and head off. We always have the time, if you have the space, here at Type 40 Live. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think of the Robots of Death and your tributes to the late Pamela Salem in the comments section there. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Don't throw hands at me.